He was the only black passenger in first class when the flight attendant leaned down and whispered, "Sir, this section isn't for service staff." Everyone stared as he held up his boarding pass. Seat 2A. Paid in full. The captain was called. Security surrounded him. Cameras rolled. But when the truth came out about who he really was, the entire plane went silent. What happened next changed how the world saw racism at 30,000 feet. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. In a world where brilliance wears lab coats, a janitor's son dared to wear dreams instead. The corridors of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology gleamed like a different planet, polished marble, walls lined with the portraits of men who changed the world. The kind of place where futures were designed, coded and patented. Every sound inside carried purpose. The sharp echo of professors' heels, the chatter of research teams dissecting data, the hum of discovery. And somewhere between those sounds, there was the quiet scrape of a mop. Malcolm Rivers moved carefully down the hallway, his brown hands gripping the handle like an instrument. The blue uniform hung loose on his frame, the plastic badge, facilities dangling from his chest. Every night as students filed out of classrooms, he began his shift at 11. By dawn he'd vanish again, like he was never there. But Malcolm didn't just clean. He listened. He memorized the words floating from lecture halls. Differential equations, probability fields, chaotic symmetry. The kind of language that didn't belong to him, or so people said. His father, Thomas Rivers, had worked here for almost 20 years. Everyone knew him. Tom the janitor, the one who fixed leaky pipes, carried extra trash liners, smiled even when ignored. Thomas believed in quiet dignity. "We don't belong in their world, son," he often said. "We just keep it clean." But Malcolm didn't agree. He saw beauty in the very equations those students scribbled on whiteboards. Numbers spoke to him like music. When the hallways emptied and the building grew silent, he'd sneak into the back of lecture hall 4A, sweeping one row at a time, pretending not to notice the chalkboard filled with formulas. Sometimes he'd rewrite them from memory onto napkins he kept in his pocket. Sometimes he'd solve them, just to see if he could. It started years ago when he was 12 and his father brought him to work on a Saturday. A professor had left the projector on, equations glowing across the dark room. Malcolm couldn't look away. He didn't understand a single symbol back then, but something about their rhythm, their structure, felt like a hidden code waiting for him. Since then, he'd been chasing that language, teaching himself from discarded textbooks and online courses he accessed through the public library. Now at 19, he understood far more than most undergraduates. But nobody knew. Not the professors who stepped around him without making eye contact. Not the students who laughed when they saw him carrying trash bags through the math department. Not even his father, who thought his son's notebooks were filled with sketches or song lyrics. Tonight, though, the air felt different. Cold. Expectant. Malcolm wheeled his cart into the East Wing. Past the silver doors marked restricted access, faculty labs only. Usually locked. Tonight, the red light above the keypad was dark. Someone had forgotten to seal it. He hesitated, glancing at the CCTV camera in the corner. It blinked once, off. Maintenance power outage, maybe. He could hear his father's voice in his head. "Don't ever go where you don't belong, boy. They won't see curiosity, they'll see trespass." But curiosity was stronger than fear. He pushed the door open. The lab was colder than the hallway. Lights dimmed to a soft electric blue. Whiteboards covered every wall, layers of equations sprawling across them, like wild vines. In the center, a single blackboard stood under a spotlight. On it, written in faint chalk, the Conway-Myers quantum field problem. Unsolvable since now. Malcolm's breath caught. He'd read about it before. MIT's most famous unsolved riddle, the one that broke 3 generations of mathematicians. Entire dissertations had failed to scratch it. And now, there it was, right in front of him. He stepped closer, heart pounding. The symbols made sense. Too much sense. For a moment, he forgot who he was. The janitor's kid, the one who wasn't supposed to touch brilliance. In that instant, he was just a mind seeing truth. He reached for a piece of chalk, then stopped himself. His reflection glinted faintly in the lab's window. Uniform, mop bucket, badge. What right did he have? He turned toward the door, ready to leave. But his eyes drifted back to the board. The third line, there was a flaw. A small one. Invisible to most eyes, but clear to him. Someone had assumed constant coefficients where variable flux applied. It threw off the entire structure. If he just adjusted that, don't even think about it. A voice murmured behind him. Malcolm froze. It was his father. Thomas stood in the doorway, his flashlight cutting a beam through the dark. His face was half shadowed, half tired. "What are you doing in here?" he whispered sharply. "This isn't our space, son." "I just wanted to see it," Malcolm said quietly. "They've been trying to solve it for 50 years. And that's their business," Thomas snapped. "You think they'll thank you for touching their work? You'll lose your job before they even ask your name." Malcolm stepped back, guilt and fire battling inside him. "I could fix it," he said. Thomas sighed deeply, rubbing his forehead. "You got that look again. Like you're somewhere else. You can't fix what's not yours to touch. These people." He stopped, lowering his voice. "They don't see you like that. They see me. The man who cleans their floors. And you're my son. You'll carry that too." "But what if I'm more than that?" Malcolm asked softly. His father stared at him for a long moment. "You are. But they don't have to believe it for it to be true. You hear me?" Malcolm nodded, but his eyes stayed on the board. Thomas exhaled, shaking his head. "Lock up when you're done. And for God's sake, don't touch anything." Then he left. The sound of the door closing echoed through the room, leaving Malcolm alone again. Alone with the equation. He stared at it until the world outside disappeared. The night, the campus, even his father's warning. All that remained were the symbols. He began pacing. The problem dealt with nonlinear field energy distribution, a theory meant to unify quantum behavior with gravitational constants. Every mathematician who tried had collapsed under its contradictions. But what if the contradictions were the key? He grabbed the chalk. For the next hour, he worked silently, numbers blooming under his hand like constellations. He corrected the flux, rebalanced the tensor fields, inverted the secondary coefficients, then paused. Sweat slid down his neck. He could feel something aligning, something bigger than himself. He wrote faster, each line unlocking the next. When he reached the final step, his hand trembled. He set the chalk down, stepped back, and stared. The board was full. The equation balanced. Elegant. He'd done it. He'd solved the unsolvable. A slow smile crept across his face, equal parts awe and disbelief. He whispered to himself, "It's beautiful." But before he could take a picture or even breathe in triumph, he heard the faint click of a door latch. Footsteps. He turned. A man in a lab coat entered, bleary-eyed from a long night. Professor Leonard Myers, head of the department. He stopped cold, staring at the chalkboard, then at Malcolm. "What are you doing here?" Myers demanded. Malcolm froze. His heart hammered. "I was just cleaning." "Cleaning?" The professor's eyes narrowed. "What is this? Who wrote that?"
"I did," Malcolm said, barely audible.
For a second, there was silence, thick, dangerous silence. Then Myers laughed, short and sharp. "You expect me to believe that? That you solved this?" He stepped closer, scanning the board. His smile faltered. "This can't be right," he muttered. "It's too consistent." Malcolm's voice steadied. "It's correct. I rebalanced the energy field. Your constant coefficient was off." The professor turned slowly toward him, expression unreadable. "Who let the janitor's kid in here?" Malcolm's stomach dropped. Before he could answer, the professor stormed toward the door, shouting, "Security! Get down here!" Malcolm's pulse exploded. He looked at the board, his proof, his brilliance, and knew he couldn't stay. The footsteps grew louder in the hall. He snatched his notebook, stuffed it in his pocket, and darted out the side exit, disappearing into the stairwell. Down in the basement, his father's radio crackled faintly from the custodial room. Thomas looked up as Malcolm burst in, breathless and pale. "What happened?" Malcolm didn't answer. He just said, "I think I did something they won't forgive." Thomas stared at his son, confusion and dread mixing in his eyes. "What did you do, Malcolm?" Malcolm swallowed hard. "I solved it." The room went silent, except for the hum of the fluorescent light overhead. Somewhere above them, security alarms began to echo faintly through the empty halls. One night, a door left ajar leads him inside MIT's restricted mathematics lab, where a question on the board reads, "Unsolvable since 1969. Sometimes destiny hides in chalk dust," and silence. The night lingered heavy in the air, long after Malcolm fled the lab. His pulse still drummed inside his ears, matching the rhythm of his steps as he descended into the basement where his father waited, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. "What did you say?" Thomas whispered. as though afraid the walls might hear.
I solved it, Malcolm said, breath-catching. That problem, they've been working on it for decades, and
Thomas's voice cut through him. You went into the restricted wing? I just wanted to look, the door was open. Doesn't matter, Thomas interrupted sharply. You can't go near those rooms, son. You don't belong there. Not now, not ever. The words stung more than any reprimand. You don't belong there. Malcolm looked at his father, the man who'd worked himself to the bone to raise him, who'd swallowed insults with a grin to keep a paycheck. He didn't mean it cruelly. He meant it fearfully. But to Malcolm, it felt like surrender. I didn't steal anything, Malcolm said quietly. I just solved what they couldn't. Thomas shook his head. You think they'll care about that? They'll see you as trouble, not talent. MIT doesn't hand out second chances to boys like us. Malcolm lowered his eyes. The glow from the vending machine flickered across his face, painting him in red and blue shadows. I just wanted to prove it to myself. Thomas's voice softened. You already did. You don't need them to tell you you're smart. But Malcolm wasn't convinced. Deep down, he knew he needed them to see him, to admit that someone who scrubbed their floors could stand beside their best minds. That need, quiet and unrelenting, had lived in him since the first day he walked these halls. He went home before dawn, head full of numbers and regret. By the time the morning sun filtered through the windows of the mathematics building, the campus buzzed with uneasy energy. Professors whispered outside the lab. Grad students huddled in confusion. The blackboard had become a shrine to something extraordinary. Dr. Leonard Myers stood frozen before it, arms folded, his thin mouth pursed in disbelief. This can't be right, he muttered to the other faculty. This formulation is perfect. The coefficients align. The vector symmetry, it's consistent. A young postdoc leaned in. But who wrote it? That, Myers said coldly, is the question. The head of department, Dr. Patel, rubbed her temples. You're saying someone came in overnight and solved the unsolvable? Myers nodded reluctantly. Someone broke into this lab, trespassed on restricted grounds, and somehow did this. He pointed to the elegant spiraling math that covered the board. It's not just correct, it's intuitive, almost artistic. They all fell silent. For a brief, uncomfortable moment, the only sound was the faint squeak of the janitorial cart down the hall. Malcolm. The thought hit Myers like static. He remembered the young man in the blue uniform from last night, the one who'd stood frozen in the lab. He dismissed it immediately. Impossible. And yet, the handwriting on the board, it wasn't his, or any of his team's. The strokes were lighter, more deliberate, almost hesitant. Someone had written with both precision and humility. He turned toward the hallway. Outside, Malcolm was pushing his mop slowly, keeping his eyes down. His body ached from lack of sleep, but his mind still buzzed from the night's revelation. Every corner of the building felt charged now, as if the air itself knew what he had done. Students passed him, earbuds in, discussing morning lectures. Not one of them looked at him. He stopped for a moment by the glass wall that led into the faculty corridor. Through it, he could see the professors gathered in the lab, pointing, gesturing, arguing. His heart jumped. They were looking at his work. For the first time in his life, MIT was staring at something he created. He wanted to smile, but then he saw Myers's expression. Suspicion, not awe. That's when he knew his father had been right. He turned away, gripping the mop handle so tightly his knuckles whitened. A voice called from behind him. Hey, you custodian. Malcolm turned. A security officer approached, tall, broad-shouldered, badge glinting under the hallway light. Dr. Myers wants to see you. Malcolm's chest tightened. Why? The officer shrugged. You tell me. He followed reluctantly, each step echoing louder than it should. When he entered the lab, the professors turned toward him in unison. The board loomed behind them, filled with his handwriting. His midnight confession. Mr. Rivers. Dr. Patel said coolly. You were seen in this wing last night. Malcolm's mouth went dry. I was cleaning. Cleaning, Myers repeated, his tone dripping disbelief. Did you happen to clean this board too? A few faculty members chuckled under their breath. Malcolm's eyes flickered toward the chalkboard. No, I wrote on it. The room went still. Myers tilted his head. You saying you wrote that? Yes. Someone laughed outright this time. A graduate assistant, unable to contain it. Come on, man. That equation's been open for 50 years. I know, Malcolm said softly. That's why I wanted to try. Dr. Patel leaned forward. And you expect us to believe a facilities worker cracked one of the hardest mathematical problems in history in one night? Malcolm said nothing. He didn't know how to explain it. The patterns that had appeared in his mind, the way the solution had unfolded like a melody only he could hear. Did someone help you? Myers pressed. Did you copy this from somewhere? No, Malcolm said. I just saw it. Myers studied him closely, then turned to the others. Check the cameras. That word sent a chill through Malcolm's spine. Patel frowned. The CCTV. Exactly, Myers said. Let's confirm what we're dealing with. One of the technicians tapped into the feed from the previous night. On the monitor, the black and white footage flickered, the hallway at 1:12 a.m., the restricted lab door opening, and a slim figure stepping inside, mop cart badge, blue uniform. The image was clear. Patel's jaw tightened. Unauthorized entry after hours. That's enough. Myers didn't speak. He just looked at Malcolm, long and cold. You broke into a faculty lab, tampered with research property, and claimed to have solved an equation that's baffled the entire academic world for half a century. He stepped closer. Tell me, what should we call that? Genius or delusion? Malcolm swallowed hard. Call it what you want, but it's right. Myers stared at him for a moment longer, then said to the room, Get the dean. Thomas Rivers walked in just as his son was being questioned. His uniform sleeves were still rolled up, hands smelling of bleach and floor wax. He stopped cold when he saw the circle of professors surrounding Malcolm. What's going on here? He asked. Dr. Patel turned to him. Your son accessed a restricted area last night. We're investigating. Thomas looked from her to Malcolm. Is that true? Malcolm hesitated. Yes. Thomas's face drained of color. Lord have mercy. Sir, Myers said to Thomas, we're trying to understand how your son managed to replicate, if not outright falsify, an advanced mathematical derivation that doesn't belong to him. Thomas bristled. He didn't falsify anything. He's not that kind of boy. That's not your call, Patel snapped. We'll handle this internally. Malcolm wanted to speak, to defend himself, but his father's eyes stopped him, pleading, terrified. Don't make it worse. He stood there in silence, a 19-year-old black kid surrounded by white coats, each one looking at him as though he'd stolen something sacred. Until further notice, Patel announced, this matter is under review. Security will escort Mr. Rivers off campus immediately. The officer stepped forward. Thomas started to protest, but Malcolm touched his arm lightly. It's okay, Dad. His voice cracked. Let's go. As they walked out, Malcolm turned one last time toward the board. His handwriting shimmered under the light, the one place in that building where his mind had lived free. He realized then what his father had meant, about knowing too much in places that didn't want to see you. Outside, the sky was pale, the morning wind sharp against his face. Thomas said nothing until they reached the parking lot. Then quietly, you shouldn't have gone in there. Malcolm nodded, tears threatening but not falling.
Yeah, I know.
They drove home in silence, the city waking around them, radio off. Back inside the MIT math department, Dr. Patel stood before the monitor, replaying the footage one last time. The camera caught Malcolm's face clearly as he stared at the board in awe, chalk in hand. She paused it there. Myers stepped beside her. He'll deny it, but it's him. Patel didn't respond immediately. She looked at the solved equation again, so perfect it almost scared her. Who is he? She finally asked. Myers folded his arms. The janitor's kid. Patel turned toward the window, watching students file into the courtyard below. Then how? She whispered. Did he solve what none of us could? Her phone buzzed, a call from the dean's office. She answered. Voice steady. Yes, sir. We have a situation. You'll want to see this. Security footage shows Malcolm inside the lab. The dean calls an emergency meeting. Who is he and how did he get in? In America, brilliance is negotiable, but race is not. The dean's office lights were never meant for mercy. They burned bright even on cloudy mornings, reflecting off the polished mahogany desk and the gold lettering that read Dean of Mathematics, Charles W. Alderson. That morning, the air inside carried the same static charge as a courtroom. Dr. Alderson stood beside the window, arms folded, watching as students crossed the courtyard below. Behind him, Dr. Patel and Professor Myers waited in uneasy silence. On the desk sat a folder labeled Security Review, Incident 14A Quantum Field Room. The dean finally spoke. So this is what we've become? His tone was calm, but the edge was unmistakable. A custodian's son, breaking into faculty labs, tampering with academic research, and now we're trending on social media? Patel cleared her throat. It's spreading faster than we can contain. Someone leaked that a non-student may have accessed confidential research materials. Leaked? Alderson turned sharply. From where? Myers hesitated. We don't know, but the footage of him in the lab is circulating internally. Staff are talking. Wonderful, the dean muttered. MIT looks like a playground without locks. He sat down and opened the folder. Malcolm's staff ID photo stared up from the page, brown eyes steady, expression unreadable. This boy Rivers, right? The janitor's son? Yes, sir, Patel said quietly. Thomas Rivers works maintenance. The boy assists part-time. Alderson frowned. Does he have any academic record here? No enrollment. No transcript. No credentials beyond high school, Myers answered. Then how the hell did he write that? The dean jabbed a finger toward a printed image of the solved equation, its lines glowing under the light. This anomaly. You're telling me a kid with no college education produced that? It's mathematically consistent, Patel admitted reluctantly. Whoever did it understood the quantum field models better than most graduate students. The dean's eyes narrowed. Then he copied it. Maybe from an unpublished paper, or one of your drafts. I don't keep my work lying around, Myers said defensively. Then perhaps he found something online, Alderson said. Either way, he didn't invent it. Silence filled the room, the kind that follows when everyone agrees but no one dares to say it aloud. Outside, down in the maintenance wing, Thomas Rivers sat on a metal stool, staring at his coffee, as if it might offer answers. He'd been called into HR earlier that morning, and told to take a few days off while things are reviewed. Suspended, though no one had used the word. He hadn't told Malcolm yet. When his son finally arrived, still in uniform, still with that quiet mix of pride and dread in his eyes, Thomas knew the conversation would shatter something between them. They're saying I stole it, Malcolm said, sitting opposite his father. Thomas didn't meet his gaze. Son, they said I copied some professor's work, that I broke in to cheat. Thomas's voice was low. They'll twist anything to fit what they already believe. That's why I told you not to go in there. Malcolm looked down at his hands. They still bore faint white traces of chalk. I didn't do anything wrong. I know, Thomas said, but in places like this, it doesn't matter what's true. It matters who's saying it. Across campus, the whispers had already begun. In cafeterias and dorm halls, conversations sounded the same. You hear about that janitor kid?
They say he hacked into the lab.
No way he solved that thing. Probably copied it off some forum. He thinks he's Einstein or something. Each rumor grew sharper, uglier. What had started as fascination curdled into mockery. By noon, the story had reached the faculty lounge. Dr. Naomi Blake, the only black assistant professor in the mathematics department, overheard two colleagues talking by the coffee machine. Imagine the audacity, one said. Sneaking in just to scribble nonsense on our research board. It's sad, really, another replied. Makes you wonder if he even understands what he wrote. Naomi looked up from her cup. Or maybe he does. And that's what scares you. The room fell quiet. She left before they could respond. Back in the maintenance wing, Thomas watched as Malcolm packed his things. Where are you going? Home, Malcolm said. They told me I'm suspended too. Until they finish their review. Thomas's jaw tightened. They're punishing me for what you did. I didn't ask them to, Malcolm said, anger rising. I didn't ask for any of this. Yeah, but it's happening anyway, Thomas snapped. You think they see you as a genius now? No. You embarrassed them. You showed them up. Malcolm stopped. So what was I supposed to do, Dad? Pretend I'm dumb so they feel comfortable? Thomas rubbed his eyes. You were supposed to survive. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, the autumn wind pushed leaves down the corridor like whispers. Upstairs, Dr. Patel met with the dean again, a printed report in hand. We ran plagiarism checks, she said. No match, nothing online, no prior publications. Alderson's brow furrowed. So it's original. It appears so. Then we have a bigger problem, he said, because if we admit a janitor's son solved this, it makes our entire department look like fools. Patel hesitated. You're suggesting we suppress it? I'm suggesting we manage it. Alderson replied. We'll frame it as an unauthorized act, breach of security. The rest will fade. And the boy? We'll handle him quietly. That afternoon, campus security arrived at the Rivers' small apartment, just off Massachusetts Avenue. Malcolm answered the door, his father behind him. "Mr. Rivers?" the taller guard said. "The dean would like to see you tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Thomas frowned. "For what?" "Statement of events," the man said. "It's protocol." The next day, the campus buzzed again. A memo had leaked, one that framed Malcolm's actions as academic interference. The online student forum lit up instantly. MIT janitor's kid breaks in to fake math solution. He's probably trying to go viral for attention. Maybe he's mentally unstable. Malcolm read the posts in silence, scrolling through lines of ridicule that blurred together. Each one chipped at something deep inside. Thomas stood behind him, fists clenched. "You don't have to go," he said. "I do," Malcolm said. "If I don't speak, they'll tell my story for me." The next morning, Malcolm walked across the courtyard toward the dean's building. The sky was overcast, the air sharp with early frost. Students passed him without a glance, though a few whispered, recognizing him from the circulating image. Inside, the receptionist avoided eye contact. "You can go in," she said quietly. Malcolm entered the conference room. The walls were glass, the floor a gleaming white that made him feel exposed. At the far end of the table sat Dean Alderson, Dr. Patel, Dr. Myers, and 2 administrative officers. What Malcolm didn't see, at least not right away, were the cameras. 3 of them, mounted discreetly near the corners. Alderson gestured for him to sit. "Mr. Rivers," he began smoothly, "thank you for coming. We just want to clarify what happened that night." Malcolm sat down, back straight, voice calm. "I was cleaning the lab. The door was unlocked. I saw the problem on the board. I tried to solve it." Alderson nodded slowly. "And why would you attempt that?" Malcolm blinked. "Because I could." Myers gave a humorless laugh. "You could? You realize this equation has stumped experts for decades?" "I didn't mean disrespect," Malcolm said. "I just saw something no one else did." The dean leaned forward. "Mr. Rivers, do you understand how this looks? An unregistered staff member entering a restricted lab, altering research property, and claiming credit for theoretical work beyond his scope." "I wasn't claiming credit," Malcolm said. "I just wanted to see if it worked." "Did you copy this from any external material?" Patel asked. "No." "Did anyone help you?" "No." "Then where did you learn this?" Malcolm hesitated. I study, online, books, old lecture notes." Myers shook his head. "Impossible." Alderson sighed. "We have to be realistic here. Genius doesn't just appear out of thin air, especially not from someone without formal training." Malcolm met his gaze steadily. "So it's not the math you don't believe. It's me." The dean's expression hardened. "You're out of line." For a moment the room was still. Then Alderson looked toward one of the administrators and said, "We're recording this for our records. Let's make sure everything's clear." Malcolm turned his head, seeing the cameras now, red lights blinking. "You're recording this?" "Standard procedure," Alderson said. "We need documentation." Malcolm stood slowly. "You're not documenting. You're building a show." "Sit down, Mr. Rivers." He didn't move. "You're not looking for truth. You're looking for a story that makes you comfortable." Patel's eyes flickered with guilt. But she stayed silent. Thomas waited outside in the hallway, unaware of what was happening inside. A janitorial cart stood parked nearby, his own, its mop leaning against the wall. Inside, Alderson leaned back in his chair, tone final. "Effective immediately. Both you and your father are suspended pending further investigation." Malcolm's voice dropped, barely above a whisper. "You mean fired?" Alderson didn't answer. Malcolm turned toward the door, jaw set, eyes wet, but defiant. As he stepped into the hallway, the flash of a camera went off. One of the student reporters had slipped in, tipped off by someone inside the office. By afternoon, the headline was everywhere. MIT janitor's son under investigation for academic fraud. Malcolm is summoned to the dean's office, where waiting cameras are ready to humiliate him. The same room that honors genius can destroy it. The lecture hall had never felt so large, or so cold. Rows of students filled the seats, murmuring as they glanced toward the front. Some had heard whispers of what was about to happen. Others came out of curiosity, sensing scandal in the air. At the center of the stage stood Malcolm Rivers, 19, hands clasped in front of him, eyes downcast. His blue janitorial uniform had been replaced by a plain white shirt and dark slacks, clothes borrowed from his father that didn't quite fit. Behind him, The blackboard waited. The same kind of board that had once held his greatest triumph, now waiting to bear his undoing. Dean Alderson stood off to the side, his posture confident, his tone falsely kind. "Thank you all for coming," he began, addressing the faculty and the half-dozen students allowed to attend under the guise of transparency. "We're here to clarify certain misunderstandings regarding recent events in the mathematics department." Malcolm glanced toward the back of the room. His father wasn't allowed inside. HR had told him it was a closed academic matter. Thomas waited in the corridor, pacing, clutching the edge of his worn work cap like a lifeline. Inside, Malcolm could feel every eye on him, studying, measuring, doubting. "Mr. Rivers," Alderson said, turning toward him, "you claim to have solved the Conway-Myers quantum field problem. Is that correct?" "I didn't claim anything," Malcolm said softly. "I just wrote what I saw." A low chuckle rippled through the audience. Someone whispered, "Wrote what he saw? What's that even mean?" Alderson raised a hand. "Silence, please." He turned back to Malcolm. "You must understand how extraordinary your assertion is. This equation has defied some of the greatest minds for over 50 years. Are you suggesting that without formal training, you achieved what tenured professors could not?" Malcolm's throat tightened. "I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just wanted to understand it." The dean smiled thinly. "Understanding and mastery are very different things. Would you be willing to demonstrate your understanding here, in front of us?" Malcolm hesitated. "Right now?" "Yes," Alderson said. "If your claim is genuine, you shouldn't have any trouble recreating what you wrote." He gestured toward the chalkboard. The eraser marks from an earlier lecture still dusted the surface, faint traces of someone else's logic already there. Malcolm's pulse quickened. He could feel the room's hunger, not for truth, but for spectacle. He stepped forward, picked up the chalk. For a moment his hand hovered in the air. Then muscle memory took over. The symbols came slowly at first, cautious strokes forming familiar patterns. A few faculty members leaned in, expecting gibberish. But as the board filled, their faces shifted, from condescension to quiet confusion. Malcolm spoke as he wrote, his voice steady. "The original approach assumes constant coefficients under vacuum fluctuation. But the field isn't stable. It oscillates under stress. If you treat the coefficients as variables, they resolve into harmonic symmetry." Myers frowned. "That's impossible." Malcolm kept writing. "You said that last night." The professor stiffened. "Excuse me?" Malcolm didn't look up. His hands moved faster now, chalk tracing an elegant curve across the board. "You fixed the energy distribution at a constant. That's why it never balanced. The system wants to breathe. It expands, contracts, like lungs." Patel exchanged glances with another professor. "He's right about the variance," she whispered. Alderson shot her a warning look. When Malcolm finally stepped back, the board was full, dense, precise, yet breathtakingly clear. Every symbol lined up with quiet logic, every value accounted for. He turned around, chalk dust on his sleeves. "That's it." For a heartbeat, silence held the room. Then Myers spoke. "Coincidence," he said sharply. "He's parroting something he saw in an old lecture." "There's no such lecture," Patel murmured. Alderson folded his arms. "Even if this demonstration holds, there's no proof that Mr. Rivers derived it independently. He had unauthorized access to research materials. For all we know, he copied one of your early drafts, Dr. Myers." Myers nodded eagerly. "Exactly." Malcolm felt heat rush to his face. "I didn't copy anything. I don't even have access to your research." "Then how did you know the underlying structure?" "I just worked it out." Myers smirked. "Oh, you worked it out. And I suppose next you'll tell us you also cracked the Riemann hypothesis between mopping floors." Laughter rippled through the room. Malcolm clenched his jaw, holding his gaze on the floor. Alderson's voice softened, adopting the false compassion of a man performing virtue. "Mr. Rivers, sometimes we overestimate our abilities. It's possible that you stumbled upon fragments of other people's work without realizing it. That happens. It's not your fault." Malcolm looked up. "You don't believe I could do it because of who I am?" Alderson blinked. "Excuse me?" "You said it, it's not my fault. Like I'm a child who wandered into the wrong room. You keep calling me Mr. Rivers like it's politeness, but what you mean is the janitor's kid." The dean's smile vanished. "Watch your tone." Malcolm's voice trembled, but it didn't break. "You asked me to prove I could think. I did, and now you're angry that it's true." Gasps fluttered through the audience. Patel shifted uncomfortably, looking away. Alderson's face reddened. This meeting is over. Malcolm turned toward the board. You can erase it if you want, he said quietly. But the truth doesn't disappear just because you don't like who wrote it. The room fell silent again. For a long time, no one moved. Then Myers picked up the eraser. He wiped the board clean line by line, erasing hours of genius, as if it were dirt on glass. Thomas Rivers burst into the hall just as the doors opened. What happened? He asked, eyes wide. Malcolm didn't answer. He walked past him, shoulders shaking, tears burning in his eyes, but refusing to fall. Thomas looked through the glass door and saw what his son had left behind. Nothing. A spotless board, the world cleansed of proof. Inside, Alderson whispered to Patel, "We'll file it as a disciplinary breach." Quietly, "I don't want this turning into a media circus." But someone else in the room had other plans. At the back unnoticed, Dr. Naomi Blake sat with her phone in her lap. She had recorded everything, from Alderson's smirks, to Myers' insults, to Malcolm's trembling, yet brilliant performance. She wasn't sure why she did it. Maybe instinct. Maybe anger. Later that night she would replay the video again, and again her own voice audible in the background as she murmured, "He's right about the variance." She knew what releasing it would mean. Career suicide. But she also knew what silence would cost. Outside the building, rain began to fall. Malcolm and his father stood under the awning, neither speaking. The sound of rain on concrete filled the gap between them. Finally Thomas said, "You showed them, son." Malcolm shook his head. "No, I didn't. They saw it, and still erased it." Thomas put a hand on his shoulder. "They can't erase you." But Malcolm wasn't so sure. Back upstairs, Naomi stared at the recording one last time. Her thumb hovered over the send button. The email already drafted, to Boston Herald Tips, subject MIT cover-up. A single raindrop hit the edge of her phone screen, sliding down like a tear. She hesitated for one heartbeat longer. Then she pressed send. A young black assistant professor named Dr. Naomi Blake secretly records the scene on her phone. When truth meets the internet, silence no longer protects power. The video began like any other clip on the internet. Grainy, handheld, almost forgettable. A shaky frame of a lecture hall. Chalk squeaking faintly in the background. A young black man in a too large shirt standing before a wall of equations. But 30 seconds in, it changed. Because by then, everyone watching realized the kid wasn't just writing. He was creating. His voice, calm but firm, filled the speakers. The system wants to breathe. It expands, contracts, like lungs. The comment section froze. It wasn't just another classroom moment. It was a revelation. And then, the other sound came. Laughter. Mockery. The sting of condescension that followed brilliance spoken from the wrong mouth. The video ended with a line that burned its way into everyone's mind. "You can erase it if you want. But the truth doesn't disappear just because you don't like who wrote it." That was the sentence that detonated the internet. Naomi hadn't expected it to spread so fast. She'd uploaded the video anonymously through a private burner account. No name, no metadata, no mention of MIT. She titled it simply, "They Laughed at the Janitor's Son." Within 12 hours, it had been reposted across every major platform. Twitter threads dissected every second. TikTok edits paired the video with music. Slow piano over Malcolm's quiet defiance. YouTube creators broke it down frame by frame, calling it the most uncomfortable moment of institutional arrogance ever caught on camera. By morning, an MIT janitor kid was trending worldwide. In living rooms, dorms, and offices, people watched the humiliation unfold in real time and felt their stomachs twist. The room's laughter, the dean's patronizing smile, the way the professor's hand erased Malcolm's proof. Every gesture screamed what so many had felt for years, that genius had a color code. Naomi sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, phone vibrating non-stop. Her inbox was flooded with messages, some anonymous, some from fellow faculty. "You leaked it, didn't you?
Was that real?
Are you safe?" She didn't answer. Her chest felt heavy, every breath tight. She'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Her partner, a journalist named Aisha, read over her shoulder. "You know they'll come for you," she said quietly. Naomi nodded. "I know. But you did the right thing." Naomi closed the laptop. The right thing doesn't always mean the safe thing. Across town, the Rivers apartment was silent. Malcolm sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his phone. His inbox overflowed, hundreds of notifications, texts from unknown numbers, interview requests. He hadn't even seen the clip until that morning. A coworker from his father's building sent it to him with a single text. He clicked the link, and there it was. His worst moment. Captured forever. His voice trembling. His face breaking. The laughter. The eraser. By the time he reached the end, he wasn't breathing. Thomas walked in, holding a mug of coffee. "You've been quiet for an hour. You okay?" Malcolm turned the phone around silently. Thomas squinted. The color drained from his face as he recognized the scene. "Is that—" "It's me," Malcolm said softly. "Somebody recorded it." Thomas sat down beside him, eyes wide with a mixture of pride and dread. "People need to see this," he said. "They need to know what they did to you." "They already do." Malcolm handed him the phone. The video had 4.2 million views. Thomas's voice wavered. 4 million. 5 now, Malcolm murmured. The apartment felt smaller with every passing minute. Outside, news trucks began parking along the curb. Reporters waited near the entrance. Thomas peeked through the blinds. "They're here." "For what?" "To talk to you," Thomas said. "To use you." Malcolm stood, restless. "I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't want to be some story." "Son," Thomas said softly. "Sometimes stories find you whether you want them or not." The knock came at 10:30. Thomas opened the door. A young reporter with a press badge smiled brightly. Microphone already in hand. "Mr. Rivers, we'd love to hear your reaction to the MIT video." Thomas closed the door slowly. "Not today." Inside, Malcolm paced. "They'll twist it again. First they said I cheated. Now they'll say I'm playing victim." Thomas sighed. "The truth's out now. Let it speak for itself." But truth never speaks alone. It's always drowned out by louder voices. By noon, major outlets picked up the story. CNN ran the headline. MIT student or janitor's son. Viral video sparks debate on race and genius. Fox News followed with their own framing. MIT accused of reverse racism after viral clip taken out of context. The same footage. Two opposite narratives. Malcolm scrolled through the comments, unable to stop himself. "He's a genius. Give that kid a scholarship. This is why we need diversity in STEM. This is fake. No way he solved anything. Affirmative action gone too far. He's lying for clout." He dropped the phone, breathing heavily. Thomas sat across from him, eyes hard. "Stop reading that poison. I just want to know what they think." "Why?" Thomas asked. "You already know what they think. You lived it." Malcolm didn't respond. At MIT, the atmosphere was chaos. Faculty inboxes overflowed with hate mail, praise, threats, demands for accountability. Student protests began forming outside the main gates. "Justice for Malcolm Rivers," signs waved in the wind. Dean Alderson locked himself in his office, surrounded by PR staff and lawyers. The university's legal counsel spoke in clipped tones. "Dean, we need to contain this narrative. The video makes the institution look racist and cruel." "It was edited," Alderson snapped. "Out of context." "Regardless, perception is reality," the lawyer said. "We can't appear complicit." Alderson rubbed his temples. "Then what do you suggest?" The PR head, a young woman with sharp eyes, slid a printed draft across the table. "We issue a statement immediately. Control the frame before they do." "What kind of statement?" "Something measured," she said. "Professional. Distancing. We'll acknowledge the incident but emphasize policy violations." Alderson frowned. "Policy violations?" "Yes," she said. "Unauthorized access. Misconduct. That sort of thing." "You're saying we throw him under the bus?" "I'm saying we protect MIT." Alderson hesitated for half a second, then nodded. "Do it." By evening, the official press release went live on MIT's homepage, and every major outlet within minutes. Statement from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. "We are aware of the unauthorized incident involving a non-student individual accessing restricted research facilities. MIT maintains strict security and integrity protocols. The individual in question is not affiliated with the university and had no authorization to engage with or alter academic materials. We take such breaches seriously and are reviewing our safety measures to prevent future incidents." There was no name in the statement, but everyone knew exactly who they meant. Malcolm saw it within seconds. The words hit him like a physical blow. "Non-student individual." His father's voice cracked. "They're calling you an intruder," Malcolm whispered. "They just erased me again." The TV replayed the headline, MIT responds, Janitor's son not authorized to access lab. Reporters debated on live panels. Some defended him. Others ridiculed him. Social media exploded with new hashtags. Shen MIT cover-up.
He solved it.
Unauthorized genius.
Naomi watched it unfold from her office, heart pounding. Her colleagues avoided her eyes in the hallway. One of them, Dr. Myers, cornered her after a faculty meeting. You think this helps him? He hissed. You've turned him into a circus act. You've destroyed this department's credibility. Naomi met his gaze calmly. The department destroyed itself when it erased a black boy's brilliance. Myers' jaw tightened. You'll regret this. Maybe, she said. But I can live with regret. Can you live with shame? That night, Malcolm sat by the window as rain streaked down the glass. The city outside buzzed with noise. Cars, news trucks, protesters. He should have felt vindicated. Instead, he felt exposed. Dad, he said quietly. What if they're right? Thomas turned from the sink. Right about what? About me not belonging. Maybe I just don't fit their world. Thomas came closer, placing a rough hand on his son's shoulder. You fit any world that values truth. They just don't know what that looks like yet. Malcolm looked out the window again. Somewhere in the distance, the MIT dome glowed faintly against the storm. It looked less like a place of learning and more like a fortress. Naomi's phone buzzed. A new message. Unknown number. They're planning to suspend you. HR knows you leaked the footage. She stared at it for a long time, then closed the message and whispered to herself. Too late. The truth's already out. Meanwhile, MIT's PR department held another late-night call with senior administrators. We've contained the first wave, the PR director said, but the public's still demanding accountability. How bad? Alderson asked. She looked up grimly. The President of the United States just tweeted about it. MIT's PR department issues a statement calling Malcolm an unauthorized intruder. Not every apology is meant to heal. Some are meant to silence. The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. It had become the sound of their new life, soft, endless, and heavy. Every drop that hit the window of the small Cambridge apartment felt like a reminder of everything they had lost and everything they had been forced to remember. Malcolm sat at the kitchen table, staring at the same article for the 100th time. MIT responds to viral video. Policy violation, not prejudice. His name wasn't even in the headline anymore. Just individual subject. The janitor's son. The internet had moved on, but the damage stayed. Thomas Rivers, usually the steady one, had stopped talking about work altogether. He still wore his uniform every morning out of habit, even though he hadn't been called in for days. He would just sit on the couch, coffee mug in hand, watching the muted television news. When Malcolm asked what he was waiting for, Thomas simply said, "They'll call. They always do." But they didn't. That Monday, a black SUV pulled up outside the apartment. The kind with tinted windows and too much polish for their neighborhood. Malcolm saw it from the window and froze. "Dad," he said quietly. "Someone's here." Thomas peered through the blinds. "That's MIT. Look at the plates. University fleet." Moments later, there was a knock at the door. A woman in a dark trench coat stood there, umbrella dripping. She introduced herself with a smile too smooth to be genuine. "Mr. Rivers? Dean Alderson sent me. May we come in?" Malcolm hesitated. "Why?" She kept smiling. "We'd like to discuss an opportunity." Inside, she took the seat opposite Malcolm and Thomas. Another man followed. Corporate, silent, carrying a folder. "Let's get straight to it," the woman said. "MIT recognizes that the past few weeks have been difficult for your family. There's been a lot of media distortion." Thomas frowned. "Distortion? You mean the truth?" The woman's smile didn't waver. "Public perception can be complex. The university would like to extend an olive branch, an educational opportunity for Malcolm." Malcolm looked up. An opportunity. She opened the folder and slid a document across the table. A scholarship. Thomas blinked. A scholarship?
Yes.
A special program, merit-based, designed to highlight underrepresented talent. It's not direct admission, but it allows you to attend extension courses, use certain facilities, and make MIT look good. Malcolm interrupted. The woman's tone remained polite but chilled. "This would allow you to continue your education without conflict." Malcolm leaned back. "Without conflict, or without attention?" She blinked. "I'm sorry? You're not offering me a future, he said quietly. You're offering me silence. Thomas shot him a warning look, but Malcolm didn't stop. You want a picture MIT supports diversity. You don't want me in your classrooms. You just want me in your headlines. The woman cleared her throat, professionalism cracking slightly. We understand emotions are high, but this offer is generous considering. Considering what? Thomas snapped. That you called my boy an intruder? That you humiliated him in front of cameras? Now you want to buy your way out? The silence that followed was thick enough to hear the rain on the roof. The woman finally stood. If you're not interested, that's your choice. But understand, this is the university's final gesture of goodwill. If you decline, we cannot guarantee further cooperation should the press come back to this story. Malcolm stared at her. You mean if I don't take your deal, you'll bury me? She smiled faintly. No, Mr. Rivers. We'll simply move on. When the door shut behind them, the apartment felt smaller again. Thomas rubbed his face with his hands. Son, maybe you should have at least listened. I did, Malcolm said, voice tight. Every word. It wasn't for me. It was for them. They could have given you a chance. They had a chance, Dad. They erased it. Then they offered me a scholarship, so they can say they uplift black youth. It's not a gift, it's a leash. Thomas didn't argue. He just stared out the window, the rain blurring the world outside. That night, the story of the MIT scholarship leaked anyway. But not from the Rivers side. The university's PR office released a polished statement. MIT is proud to offer an educational opportunity to Malcolm Rivers, recognizing his potential and passion for learning. We remain committed to diversity, inclusion, and academic integrity. The article spread across social media as quickly as the original video had. Comment sections filled again. See? They made it right. MIT steps up for the underdog. Guess he got what he wanted after all. No one asked if Malcolm had accepted. No one asked if the offer meant anything real. He read every comment until his chest hurt. By the end of the week, the protests died down. The journalists stopped calling. The trending tags faded, replaced by the next outrage. The world had moved on. Naomi didn't. Her own life had fallen apart since the leak. She'd been called into HR 3 times. The third meeting wasn't about questions. It was about punishment. You violated confidentiality, they told her. You damaged institutional reputation. You've been placed on administrative leave. She left her office carrying a box of personal items, the walls whispering with the same gossip that once surrounded Malcolm. That night, she stopped by the Rivers apartment. Malcolm opened the door, surprised. Dr. Blake? She smiled faintly. Just Naomi now. They fired me. Thomas appeared behind his son. You're the one who leaked it, aren't you? Naomi nodded. I couldn't stand by and watch them erase him. Thomas exhaled, a mix of gratitude and exhaustion. You did right, but they'll make you pay for it. They already did, she said, but at least the world saw the truth once. Malcolm looked at her, conflicted. The world saw it, and then it forgot. Naomi tilted her head. You think truth's supposed to stay trending? No. It just needs to be seen once by the right eyes. The rest happens in silence. He didn't know what that meant yet, but he nodded anyway. Days turned into weeks. Malcolm stopped checking emails, stopped answering calls. The scholarship offer sat in a drawer, unsigned. He spent hours walking the Charles River at night, watching the reflection of the city lights ripple over dark water. Each ripple felt like the echo of a life that could have been. Sometimes he imagined himself in an MIT classroom, not as a janitor's son, not as a symbol but as a student, just a student. Other times he imagined never going back at all. Then, one afternoon, Thomas came home with an envelope in hand. His face was pale. What's that? Malcolm asked. Thomas didn't speak. He just handed it over. The letter was from MIT's facilities department. Dear Mr. Rivers, due to ongoing budgetary restructuring and operational changes, your employment at MIT will be concluded effective immediately. We thank you for your 21 years of service. Severance will be provided through the end of the month. Malcolm looked up. They fired you. Thomas forced a small smile. Budget cuts, they said. Malcolm's eyes burned. Budget cuts? After 21 years? After I ruined their reputation? Thomas shook his head. Don't do that, son. Don't carry my end too. Malcolm stood abruptly, the chair scraping back. No, this is my fault. They're still punishing me, just through you. Thomas's voice rose for the first time in weeks. Stop it. You think you broke me? You think they could take more than they already have. I scrubbed their floors so you could dream past them. Malcolm stared, tears forming. And look where dreaming got us. Thomas took a deep breath, his voice softening again. Don't let them make you bitter, Malcolm. That's the only win they understand. Turning pride into poison. He stepped closer, placing his hands on his son's shoulders. You didn't do wrong. You just did it where wrong people were watching. Malcolm closed his eyes, nodding slowly. Naomi called later that night. Her voice was quiet. They're not done. They'll spin more stories. But you can't disappear, Malcolm. You have something they'll never understand. Proof that truth survives even when it's silenced. He looked at his father sleeping in the chair by the window. Uniform still on, the termination letter folded neatly beside him. I'm not disappearing, Malcolm said. I'm just learning where to be seen next. The next morning, Malcolm checks the mailbox again and finds a second envelope from MIT. The return address isn't facilities, it's Office of Legal Affairs. When institutions erase you, sometimes you rewrite yourself. The second envelope sat untouched for 2 hours. It was heavier than the first, thicker paper, embossed logo, the kind of formality that made ordinary men nervous. Malcolm stared at it from across the table, tapping his pen against his thigh, while his father snored softly in the chair by the window. When he finally tore it open, his stomach dropped. From Office of Legal Affairs, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Dear Mr. Rivers, we have received inquiries regarding your recent public appearances and media representation. Please be advised that unauthorized use of MIT's name or materials for personal gain constitutes a violation of federal and institutional guidelines. We recommend ceasing any public commentary regarding your involvement with MIT. Failure to comply may result in legal action. It ended with a signature that looked like it had been written by a machine. Malcolm folded the letter carefully, his hands shaking. They're threatening me, he whispered. Thomas stirred. What's that? They're threatening legal action if I talk about what happened. Thomas rubbed his forehead. They're trying to scare you quiet. It's working, Malcolm admitted. I don't even know what to say anymore. The apartment had turned into a museum of silence. Even the walls seemed to avoid echoing. The scholarship offer sat unopened on the counter, next to the termination letter, and now this, a trifecta of humiliation, apology and warning. For weeks Naomi called every few days to check in. She'd lost her job, but not her resolve. You can't let them define you, Malcolm, she said one night over the phone. The same way they rewrote that equation on your board, they'll rewrite your story too if you stay still. He sighed. You think anyone will listen now? You don't need everyone, Naomi replied. You just need one door that doesn't close. That became her mission. She helped him apply to universities across the country. Harvard, Stanford, Georgia Tech, Princeton. Each application was meticulous. Every essay glowed with quiet brilliance, and each time she pressed submit, she whispered to herself, they'll see it this time. But rejection letters came back faster than they should have. We regret to inform you, concerns regarding academic integrity, unable to process due to reputational risk. Each one landed, like a new bruise. Malcolm tried to laugh it off. I should have known, he said once, flipping through the pile. You can't outrun a rumor that started in a room full of professors.
Naomi bit her lip. They're blacklisting you.
Yeah, he said softly, and they don't even have to say it out loud. One night, Naomi showed up at the apartment again, this time with her laptop. There's one more program, she said. Experimental Tech Accelerator, privately funded, not a university, but it gives independent researchers grants. Malcolm looked skeptical. You think they'll take me? I think they don't care about MIT politics, she said. They care about results. He submitted his proposal the same night. His algorithm for predictive field equations, the one he'd written on napkins before MIT ever noticed him. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to hope. Days passed. No reply. Then at 2:37 a.m., on a Wednesday, his inbox pinged. Subject: your submission, variable field algorithms. Mr. Rivers. I watched your video before I read your application. I stopped breathing halfway through. I don't know what's more impressive, your mind or your restraint. Meet me Friday, 10 a.m. Hotel Commonwealth Lobby. Jerome Carter. Malcolm read it twice, then a third time. The name sounded familiar. He Googled it. Jerome Carter, founder of Next Phase Systems, a black-owned technology firm valued at over $3 billion. MIT dropout, philanthropist, controversial for speaking out against institutional gatekeeping and innovation. Malcolm whispered. He's real. Thomas looked up from his chair. Who? Someone who might believe me. Friday came like a storm. Malcolm wasn't ready for. He wore his only pressed shirt, the same one from the hearing, and arrived early. The hotel lobby glowed with morning light and quiet money, marble floors, espresso machines, expensive silence. Jerome Carter arrived 15 minutes late, walking with the confidence of someone used to being underestimated. Dark suit, silver watch, eyes sharp but kind. He extended a hand. You're Malcolm. Malcolm nodded. Yes, sir. Jerome smiled. Don't call me sir. You make me sound like them. I sat in the corner booth. Jerome ordered 2 coffees. Black. I watched your clip the night it dropped, he said. Made me sick to my stomach. Reminded me of why I left that place. MIT taught me how to build machines, but not how to survive their arrogance. Malcolm listened quietly. I read your application, Jerome continued. You didn't just solve that equation. You expanded it. Do you realize that? Malcolm shook his head. I wasn't trying to expand anything. I was just fixing a broken step. That's what innovation is, Jerome said. Fixing what others swear isn't broken. Malcolm stared into his coffee. They don't care about fixing. They care about keeping. Jerome leaned forward. Then stop asking them for permission. Malcolm looked up. You don't need their approval to prove your mind, Jerome said. You need a platform. And I've got one. What are you saying? I run an incubator. Private, self-funded. We take in thinkers no one else will touch. People who scare the system. I want you there. Full funding. No string. Malcolm blinked. Why me? Jerome chuckled. Because you remind me of me before I learned how to weaponize rejection. Thomas joined them halfway through the meeting, summoned by a quick text from his son. He looked uneasy, still wearing his maintenance jacket. Jerome shook his hand warmly. Mr. Rivers, you raised a rare kind of mind. Don't let these institutions make him doubt that. Thomas smiled faintly. Easier said than done. Jerome nodded. I know. I've been where you are. I used to clean offices at MIT too. Malcolm blinked. You did? Jerome laughed. Yeah. Night shifts just like you. Only difference is, I walked out before they could tell me what I wasn't allowed to be. The honesty disarmed Malcolm. So what do you want from me? He asked. Nothing you don't already have, Jerome said. Just your curiosity, and your courage to keep using it. Naomi met them later that evening at a diner across from the hotel. She listened carefully as Malcolm explained the offer, then looked at Jerome with cautious admiration. You're giving him a lifeline, she said. Jerome sipped his coffee. No. I'm giving him a mirror. Malcolm frowned. A mirror. Jerome nodded. The world already knows your face, kid. Now you decide what they see next. They talked for hours about technology, discrimination, innovation, legacy. For the first time since the scandal began, Malcolm laughed without guilt. When they finally left the diner, Jerome walked him to the curb. The streetlights painted silver halos on the wet pavement. You have a choice, Jerome said. Malcolm tilted his head. What choice? 2 paths. Jerome said, his voice low but deliberate. You can take their scholarship, sit quietly, rebuild the version of you they can tolerate. Or, he paused, you can build something they can't control. Malcolm exhaled slowly. And if I choose the second, Jerome smiled. Then you'll have to fight them, not with fists, but with proof. Real proof. Make them remember your name, every time they try to erase it. Malcolm looked away, watching the headlights blur through the mist. He thought about his father's termination letter, the scholarship still sitting in the drawer, Naomi's career sacrificed for telling the truth. He realized the system didn't fear chaos. It feared memory, the kind that couldn't be rewritten. When he looked back, Jerome was watching him closely. You already made your decision, didn't you? Jerome asked. Malcolm nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I did. Jerome extended his hand once more. Good. Then let's start rewriting. Malcolm hesitated, then shook it. Naomi, still standing by the diner window, saw the handshake through the glass, and something inside her shifted. For the first time in months, she felt like the story wasn't ending. It was just changing hands. Later that night, Malcolm walked home through the drizzle, head full of new equations and old fears. When he reached the apartment, Thomas was asleep again in the chair by the window. Malcolm set the legal letter on the table beside his father's coffee mug. then tore it in half. The rain outside slowed to a whisper. His phone buzzed. A message from Jerome. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. First meeting. Come ready. Malcolm smiled faintly, typing a reply. I'm done being quiet. Jerome offers him a choice. Forget them, or fight them. When doors close, legends are born in basements. The next morning, the city still smelled of rain and diesel when Malcolm arrived at the address Jerome had texted him. It wasn't an office tower or a glossy lab. It was a converted warehouse tucked between two rusting freight lines on the edge of Roxbury. From the outside, it looked like nothing: cracked bricks, faded paint, a single steel door with no sign. But inside, light and sound thrummed with quiet power. Rows of old servers hummed along the back wall. Tables were cluttered with laptops, prototype drones, circuit boards. In the center stood half a dozen young people, most no older than Malcolm, gathered around a massive whiteboard covered in scribbles that looked like chaos to anyone but them. Jerome walked out from the shadows of a back office, his energy filling the room like current through a live wire. Welcome to the lab, he said. Not MIT, not Harvard, just us, the ones they won't let in. Malcolm stood still for a moment, absorbing it all. It wasn't polished or prestigious, but it breathed. Every face here carried that same expression, brilliance mixed with defiance. Jerome clapped a hand on his shoulder. You ready to work? Malcolm nodded. I've been ready. Good, Jerome said. Then meet your crew. He gestured toward the others. This is Amir, robotics. Keisha, machine learning. Marcus, material science. And Taryn, astrophysics. Everyone here's been rejected somewhere for reasons that had nothing to do with talent. Taryn, a wiry girl with sharp eyes and a NASA hoodie, smiled. We call ourselves the undocumented geniuses. Malcolm chuckled softly. Fitting. Don't let the jokes fool you, Jerome said. We build things here that the world doesn't think we should. Over the next weeks, Malcolm found rhythm inside the lab's chaos. The days bled into nights, hours of code, equations and debates that went from heat to laughter to silence. He hadn't realized how starved he'd been for this, for people who spoke his language without questioning his right to speak it. Jerome's mentorship style was part drill sergeant, part prophet. Don't chase approval, he'd say. Chase accuracy. Let the results speak louder than the system. Malcolm did. He began designing a model that would predict material fatigue in spacecraft hulls under long-duration stress, something that had puzzled NASA engineers for years. His theory stemmed from the same principle that had cracked the MIT equation. Systems breathe. Nothing stays constant. Stability lives in motion. He spent hours scribbling on a whiteboard salvaged from a school that had closed 2 blocks over. Each night he erased it and started again. Keisha noticed first. You're building something wild, aren't you? Malcolm shrugged. Maybe, she smirked. You've been erasing your board like you're hiding from ghosts. He smiled faintly. I just want to make sure I get it right before anyone else sees. 3 months in, Jerome called a meeting. Showtime, he said. We're pitching to the Carter Foundation board next week. Everyone presents something. Malcolm froze. He wasn't ready. Jerome saw it. Malcolm, you've been rewriting physics in the corner for weeks. You're presenting. Malcolm hesitated. It's not finished. It doesn't need to be finished, Jerome said. It needs to be heard. That night, Malcolm stayed behind after everyone left. The warehouse was dark, except for the blue glow of his monitor. Equations sprawled across his screen. Recursive patterns of stress mapping. Adaptive variable coefficients. Predictive nodes. The system could simulate years of wear in minutes. He leaned back, whispering to himself, "It works." He didn't know that Jerome was watching from the doorway. "You remind me of myself at your age," Jerome said quietly. Malcolm turned, startled. "You used to code like this?" Jerome chuckled. "No. I used to dream like this. Then the world tried to teach me fear." Malcolm looked back at his screen. "You stopped being afraid?" Jerome shook his head. "No. I learned how to work while scared." When presentation day came, Malcolm's nerves twisted into knots. The boardroom wasn't much. Folding tables, coffee cups, the hum of a projector. But every chair was filled with investors, engineers, and ex-academics who had left their institutions behind to join Jerome's underground movement. Jerome introduced him simply. The kid who solved what MIT couldn't. Malcolm stepped forward, laptop trembling slightly in his hands. He began explaining his algorithm. The way it adapted to flux rather than resisting it. How it redefined stress as a conversation between motion and matter. As he spoke, the room grew quiet. By the time he finished, even the air felt different. A woman at the back raised her hand. You realize this model could replace half of NASA's predictive systems? Malcolm blinked. No, ma'am. I just wanted to make something that doesn't break under pressure. Jerome smiled. That's exactly why it will change everything. Applause filled the room. For once it wasn't pity or curiosity. It was respect. Later that night, as the team celebrated over takeout boxes and music, Jerome pulled Malcolm aside. NASA's not the only one watching, he said.
What do you mean?
Jerome handed him a printed email. The header read, MIT Engineering Correspondence. Confidential. Malcolm scanned it. It was an internal memo, leaked anonymously. Subject, replication attempts. Rivers algorithm. Several departments are exploring the underlying principles of Rivers' quantum field model. Preliminary findings indicate potential applications in material stress prediction. Recommend internal use only until full validation achieved. Malcolm's hands trembled. They're copying my work. Jerome nodded grimly. They're calling it replication. That's how institutions steal politely. Malcolm's voice hardened. They said I was an intruder. Now they're raiding my mind. Jerome's tone softened. That's what power does when it's scared. It borrows without asking. Malcolm sank into a chair. The noise of celebration in the background felt far away. Keisha walked over, sensing the tension. What's going on? Jerome handed her the printout. She read it, eyes widening. They're trying to rebuild his algorithm. Malcolm stared at the floor. I spent my life trying to get inside their labs. Now they're stealing from mine. Jerome crouched beside him. You've got two options again, kid. You can go public, fight them in daylight, or you can keep building until what you make can't be stolen. Malcolm's jaw tightened. Maybe I can do both. Jerome studied him for a long moment, then smiled. Good. That's the answer I was hoping for. That night, Malcolm stayed long after everyone left, pacing the warehouse floor under the flickering light. The hum of the servers sounded like distant thunder. He opened his notebook, the one that still held the original MIT equations, smudged with chalk and sweat, and began sketching something new. Not just numbers, but strategy. He whispered to himself, you can't erase a mind that keeps rewriting. The next morning, Jerome found him asleep at the table, head resting on pages of code. He didn't wake him. He just looked down at the lines of math scrawled in pencil and murmured, You're not just building an algorithm, Malcolm. You're building a rebellion. Outside, the sunrise hit the warehouse windows, painting them gold for the first time in weeks. But inside Jerome's office, the printer whirred quietly, spitting out a new document. Another leak. Another report. This one bore the MIT seal again, but the words were colder. Internal review, potential data misappropriation linked to Rivers' model.
Further monitoring recommended.
Possible legal implications. Jerome read it twice, his jaw tightening. He looked toward the main room, where Malcolm was still asleep, unaware of the storm gathering again outside the warehouse walls. A leaked MIT report shows their team trying to replicate Malcolm's equation, without credit. They stole his mind. Now he would make them see it burn bright. The leak changed everything. When Jerome printed the new MIT memo and dropped it on the work table, the sound of the paper landing was louder than the hum of every machine in the warehouse. The words glared up at them. Cold, bureaucratic, impossible to misunderstand. Internal review, potential data misappropriation, linked to Rivers' model. Further monitoring recommended. They weren't just copying Malcolm's algorithm now. They were preparing to own it. Malcolm read the lines once, twice, then closed his eyes. They're setting me up again, he said quietly. Jerome's tone was steady, but dangerous. No. They're setting themselves up. We're going to make sure of it. The rest of the team, Keisha, Amir, Taryn, and Marcus gathered around the table, reading the printout in silence. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Taryn said what everyone was thinking. So MIT steals your work, then claims you stole from them? Malcolm nodded slowly. Full circle. Jerome exhaled, leaning back in his chair. It's the oldest trick in the book. Institutions don't destroy you. They absorb you, rewrite you into their story. Malcolm's eyes sharpened.
Then we write our own.
That was the day Proof Systems was born. A name Jerome insisted on. Because we're not selling software, Jerome told the group. We're selling the proof they refused to see. They rented a new space, a smaller warehouse closer to downtown Boston. The air smelled like dust, metal, and ambition. They filled it with folding desks, secondhand monitors, and coffee strong enough to keep the whole team wired for weeks. Jerome put Malcolm at the center of it all. Not as a symbol, but as a leader. "This isn't about revenge," Jerome said during their first meeting. "It's about visibility. They'll deny what they can't see, so make it impossible to look away." Malcolm took the challenge personally. He coded until sunrise most nights, refining his algorithm, simplifying its interface, turning abstract equations into something visual, something the world could understand without a degree. He built a demo that showed real-time stress prediction on spacecraft panels, using data NASA had made public years ago. Keisha built the front-end dashboard. Amir handled the hardware simulations. Marcus ran stress tests. Within 2 months, they had a prototype. It was beautiful, sleek, intuitive, faster than anything NASA's systems had ever produced. The algorithm predicted microfracture probabilities with 98.6% accuracy, nearly double the current industry standard. When they ran the demo for the first time, Jerome leaned back in his chair, smiling. "You realize this just outperformed every aerospace lab in the country." Malcolm didn't smile. "I realize MIT's gonna claim it next week." Jerome laughed quietly. "Not if we claim it first." They released the prototype publicly through a live stream. Malcolm standing in front of a digital display, explaining his process step by step. The video was elegant, restrained, professional, but underneath every word ran the same unspoken sentence. "You tried to erase me. I'm still here." Within hours, the internet caught fire again. Headlines exploded. Janitor's son launches tech startup to out-innovate MIT. From custodian's closet to CEO, Malcolm Rivers strikes back. Black genius challenges elite university's monopoly on innovation. The story divided the world again. Some called him a hero, a self-taught prodigy finally taking back what was his. Others called him arrogant, unstable, even dangerous. But for the first time, Malcolm didn't flinch from the noise. He appeared on podcasts, tech panels, and online interviews. When one interviewer asked, "Do you think this is revenge?" Malcolm replied calmly, "No, revenge is emotional. Proof is permanent." That line went viral again, a new slogan for a movement that was bigger than him. MIT couldn't stay silent anymore. The university issued a cautious statement through their legal team. "MIT recognizes the right of independent innovators to pursue their research, but we reject any claim of misconduct or theft. The so-called Rivers model is based on decades of prior academic work conducted within MIT's mathematics department. Any suggestion otherwise is false and defamatory." Jerome read it aloud to the team. "Defamatory. There it is." Malcolm sat quietly, scrolling through the statement on his phone. "They still can't say my name without trying to bury it." Keisha slammed her laptop shut. "They're scared. That's why they're loud." Jerome grinned. "Exactly. Let them shout. The louder they get, the more people listen." But not everyone was listening with goodwill. 3 weeks later, Malcolm received an email that froze him mid-sentence. From MIT Legal Division. Subject: Cease and desist. MIT formally requests that proof systems halt the use, distribution, and marketing of any algorithm derived from or inspired by the Conway-Myers quantum field problem. Continued use may result in legal action for defamation and intellectual property theft. Jerome read over his shoulder and exhaled slowly. "They're suing us before the courts even open." Taryn swore under her breath. "You can't copyright air." Malcolm looked up. "They don't need to win in court. They just need to drain us trying." Jerome nodded. "That's their real strategy. Make you spend your life proving what they already know." The following week, national media picked up the lawsuit. Headlines turned cynical. MIT strikes back. Claims startup used university research without credit. Hero or hacker? Questions rise around Rivers' algorithm. Proof Systems faces legal battle. The narrative shifted again. The same outlets that had celebrated Malcolm were now dissecting him. Naomi called that night, her voice trembling with anger. "They're rewriting the story again, Malcolm. They're saying you stole your own idea." He rubbed his temples. "I expected it." "No, you didn't," she said. "You're trying to fight clean in a dirty game." "I'm fighting with facts," he replied. "Facts don't survive in headlines," she said softly. He didn't answer. Jerome gathered the team in the warehouse that weekend. "Listen up. We're not folding. We're filing a counterclaim. Open source verification. We'll publish every timestamp, every prototype, every line of code, and every proof. We'll make it public record that this man," he pointed at Malcolm, "built this from the ground up." The team nodded, unified by a mix of fury and faith. Malcolm looked around at them, at the people who had bet their own futures on his name, and felt something shift inside him. Fear wasn't gone, but it had company now. Conviction. They uploaded the entire project online. Open source. Transparent. Anyone could review the code, the math, the dates. It was a bold move, one that stripped away legal armor but amplified moral strength. Within 48 hours, tech analysts confirmed what Jerome already knew. The algorithm was original, unique, mathematically elegant, and undeniably Malcolm. But MIT didn't back down. Instead, they escalated. They filed a formal lawsuit, Massachusetts Institute of Technology versus Proof Systems LLC, citing defamation, unauthorized use of research frameworks, and misrepresentation of academic property. Jerome threw the folder down on the table. "They're not suing for money, they're suing to bury the truth." Malcolm skimmed the legal language, the careful tone of privilege pretending to be professionalism. "They think I'll settle," he said. Jerome smiled faintly. "They don't know you yet." That night, while the rest of the team celebrated their open-source verification, Malcolm stood alone outside the warehouse. The city lights flickered like slow applause, but his reflection in the glass door didn't look triumphant. It looked tired, old. He thought about his father, about Naomi, about the blackboard erased in front of a laughing room, about the way people like Alderson believed reputation was ownership. He whispered to himself, "They stole my mind, but they can't use it without seeing my name." He didn't notice Jerome watching from the shadows, a phone in his hand. A call came through, a number labeled private. Jerome answered quietly, listening. When he hung up, his expression was unreadable. Inside, the printer started again, spitting out another document, fresh from the news feeds. "Breaking: MIT files federal lawsuit against Proof Systems for defamation and data theft." The words glowed on the screen like an open wound. Jerome walked back into the main room, the paper trembling slightly in his hand. The team looked up. He dropped it on the table.
"War's here," he said. "They just declared it."
MIT sues them for defamation and data theft. In court, numbers can't lie, but people still do. The courtroom smelled of varnish and tension. Sunlight spilled through tall windows, cutting across polished wood and landing on faces that pretended calm but hid storms. The seal of the United States District Court loomed above the judge's bench like a warning. Truth has consequences. For the first time since the scandal began, Malcolm Rivers wore a suit. It wasn't new. Jerome had lent it to him. Pressed it that morning. Still, it hung awkwardly on his shoulders, as if he didn't belong inside it, or this courtroom. On one side of the room sat MIT's legal team. A small army in gray. Their lead attorney, Daniel Harrington, was a man bred for rooms like this. Smooth voice, silver hair, and eyes that never reflected light. Across from them, at the defense table, sat Malcolm, Jerome, and Naomi, her presence a quiet act of defiance. Behind them sat Keisha, Taryn, and Amir, the Proof Systems team. Their faces were a mix of fear and pride, as if they knew the next few hours might decide the fate of more than just one man's name. The bailiff's voice cut through the hum. "All rise." Judge Marjorie Lynn entered, her expression unreadable. She adjusted her glasses, scanning the room as everyone took their seats. "We are here for Massachusetts Institute of Technology versus Proof Systems LLC. The plaintiff alleges defamation and theft of proprietary research. The defense alleges intellectual appropriation. Mr. Harrington, you may proceed." Harrington rose with effortless grace.
Your Honor, this case is not about race nor reputation. It's about truth and theft. The defendant, Mr.
Rivers, a self-proclaimed inventor, claims to have independently produced an algorithm, identical in structure and function to research conducted within MIT's mathematics department. We contend that he had access to said research through unauthorized means. He gestured toward Malcolm. This man, while undoubtedly bright, used his connection as a janitor's son to infiltrate restricted areas and misappropriate academic work. Now he seeks to weaponize that theft for profit and fame. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Thomas Rivers, sitting quietly in the back row, gripped the bench so hard his knuckles went white. Harrington continued smoothly. "MIT does not discriminate, Your Honor. It merely defends what is rightfully its own." He sat down, hands folded, satisfied. Jerome leaned toward Malcolm. They came to bury you, not debate you. So make them dig. When Jerome stood, his tone was sharper, heavier. Your Honor, the only thing stolen here was dignity. A young man solved a 50-year-old problem and was punished for being in the wrong uniform. When he built something extraordinary on his own, the very people who erased him tried to claim it. Today isn't about theft. It's about proof. Judge Lynn nodded slowly. Proceed with witnesses. The prosecution called Dr. Leonard Myers first. The same professor who had once laughed in Malcolm's face. He took the stand, adjusting his tie like it held moral weight. Mr. Rivers was seen inside my lab without permission, he said confidently. The equation on the board matched preliminary drafts of our research into flux variable fields. There's no way he could have derived it independently. Jerome rose. Dr. Myers, have you published that research anywhere? No, Myers said quickly. So there's no public record of it? Correct. And yet, when you say preliminary drafts, you're referring to ideas, not data, not formulas. Conceptually, yes. Then, Doctor, how can you prove he didn't arrive at the same conclusion through his own reasoning? Myers hesitated. It's statistically improbable. Jerome smiled faintly. So is a black janitor's son solving what you couldn't. But here we are. A few people in the gallery murmured approval before the judge's gavel cut them off. Next came Naomi Blake. She walked to the stand with the quiet composure of someone who had already lost everything worth fearing. Jerome's tone softened. Dr. Blake, could you tell the court your relation to both MIT and Mr. Rivers? Naomi met the judge's eyes. I was an assistant professor in the mathematics department. I was also present during the disciplinary hearing in which Mr. Rivers was humiliated before his peers. A flicker of discomfort crossed Harrington's face. And what did you witness that day? Jerome asked. Naomi took a breath. I saw a 19-year-old perform a derivation that stumped our entire department. Live flawlessly. And when he finished, instead of recognition, he received laughter. Derision. Because no one in that room believed brilliance could come from someone who mopped the floors. Vicky. Jerome paused, letting her words hang. Why did you record it? Because I knew they'd erase him. I'd seen it happen before. Ideas stolen, names rewritten, credit reassigned. She glanced toward Myers, and I wasn't going to watch it happen again. Harrington stood for cross-examination. Dr. Blake, are you aware that by leaking that video you violated institutional privacy laws? Yes. And that as a result, your employment was terminated. Yes. So your testimony here is by your own admission, that of a disgraced employee seeking vindication. Naomi's voice didn't waver. My testimony is that of a witness seeking truth. Harrington smirked. You sound rehearsed. Naomi leaned forward slightly. No, Mr. Harrington. Just tired. A quiet murmur rolled through the courtroom again. Even Judge Lean hid a faint smile. Then it was Malcolm's turn. He walked to the witness stand, adjusted the microphone, and took a deep breath. Jerome asked gently, Mr. Rivers, can you tell the court what the algorithm is? Malcolm nodded. It's a predictive model that measures mechanical stress in materials by accounting for variable flux. It adapts to pressure over time instead of resisting it. The math behind it came from the same principles that led me to solve the Conway-Myers problem. And did anyone assist you in developing it? No, Malcolm said. Just the people in this room. He added, gesturing toward his team. And they came after MIT erased me. Jerome stepped back. Your Honor, permission for the witness to present visual demonstration? The judge nodded. Granted. A screen flickered to life beside the stand. Malcolm connected his laptop, fingers moving with instinctive precision. The courtroom dimmed. He opened a simulation spacecraft panels rendered in 3D. Stress maps shifted in color as virtual pressure built over time. This, Malcolm explained, is the Rivers algorithm. It predicts structural failure, not by assuming perfect conditions, but by listening to imperfection, temperature changes, vibration, fatigue. He zoomed in on a model. Watch this panel. Traditional equations predict failure at hour 42. My model predicts it at hour 34. NASA later confirmed the actual breakpoint. 34 hours 6 minutes. The room was silent. Even Harrington leaned forward, despite himself. Jerome spoke softly. Can you show us how you wrote it? Malcolm nodded, pulling up pages of code. Each line unfurled like poetry, numbers, functions, and symbols that looked like chaos until they resolved into elegance. This isn't a copy, Malcolm said. This is memory. This is what I built when no one believed I could. He turned toward the judge. I didn't steal anything from MIT. They stole my right to belong. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Harrington stood. Mr. Rivers. That's very moving, he said smoothly. But genius doesn't absolve trespass. You entered restricted labs. You interacted with confidential materials. You admit that.
Yes.
So you concede access to intellectual property? I concede I was there, Malcolm said. But I didn't take ideas. I brought them. Harrington smiled coldly. Your Honor, permission to introduce exhibit. Jerome frowned. What's that? Harrington handed the judge a folder. An internal clause from Mr. Rivers' former employment contract, under MIT facilities. Section 14B. All materials, intellectual or otherwise, created on MIT property are the legal property of the institution. The room went still.
Malcolm froze, his mind blank.
Harrington continued, voice dripping triumph. So by his own admission, this algorithm written on MIT equipment, developed in facilities owned by the university, belongs to MIT, not Mr. Rivers. Jerome stood outraged. That clause was meant for custodial supplies, not academic work. Intent is irrelevant, Harrington said smoothly. The contract stands. Judge Lynn tapped her gavel once. Order. Jerome looked at Malcolm, eyes burning. We'll fight it, he whispered. Don't you fold now. Malcolm's voice was hollow. They already wrote my name out once. Jerome. This time they'll own it too. Naomi reached for his hand under the table. Not if we find the person who leaked that clause. She whispered. Contracts don't appear in court by accident. Harrington gathered his papers with the calm of a man who knew he'd landed the blow he came for. No further questions. Judge Lynn sighed. We will reconvene tomorrow. Court is adjourned. As the gavel struck, cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and Malcolm sat frozen at the table, the weight of another erasure pressing down on him, like gravity. Jerome leaned close. They think they've won. Malcolm didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the words in his mind. Section 4. He whispered to himself. If they own everything made inside those walls, what about the proof that proves they lied? Jerome frowned. What are you saying? Malcolm looked up, resolve sharpening. They think that clause buries me, but it buries them too. MIT's lead attorney reveals a hidden clause that could destroy their case. Even revolutionaries have traitors in their ranks. The night after the courtroom shock, the warehouse was silent. No hum of machines, no rapid typing, no debates about equations or ethics. Just the echo of defeat. The word Section 14B hung in the air like poison gas, invisible but suffocating. Malcolm sat alone in the dark, staring at the printout of the contract clause. He could still hear Harrington's voice in his head. All materials, intellectual or otherwise, created on MIT property, belong to the institution. The more he read it, the smaller his world felt. Jerome found him hours later, still at the same table, surrounded by papers and silence. You haven't gone home, Jerome said quietly. Malcolm didn't look up. Neither have you. Jerome sighed, pulling up a chair. You did everything right in there. You showed them what brilliance looks like when it refuses to apologize. That's what scared them. Malcolm finally met his eyes. And it didn't matter. One clause, one signature, and they own my entire life. Jerome leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. They don't own your life, Malcolm. They own a building and the words inside a contract. You're not ink, you're fire. But fire, Malcolm thought, could still be extinguished. By morning, the media had turned again. The headlines weren't about equations anymore. They were about Jerome Carter, radical tech founder accused of extremist rhetoric and leaked emails. Proof systems funding in question after private correspondence surfaces. MIT scandal figure tied to anti-institutional movement. The leaks came fast and cruel. Screenshots of private emails from Jerome to investors, taken out of context, sliced, and weaponized. One subject line read, "Burn the system down." Another, "They've stolen enough from us, time to take back what's ours." By noon, 3 investors had already withdrawn. Jerome slammed his laptop shut. This isn't a coincidence. Someone planted these. Keisha looked up from her desk. But how would they even get your emails? You're encrypted off-grid. Jerome's jaw tightened. Someone inside sent them. The words hit the room like a grenade. The team froze. Eyes darting. Suspicion replacing exhaustion. Taryn stood up. Wait. You think one of us leaked you? Jerome didn't answer. He just looked at each face in turn. Malcolm, Keisha, Amir, Taryn. They're trying to divide us. It's working already. Malcolm said nothing. His mind was too full of static. The courtroom, the claws, now this. It felt like every step forward came with a blade to the back. By the next day, the fallout was tangible. The warehouse lights flickered less often now. They'd had to cut the backup generator to save costs. The hum of progress was gone, replaced by whispers. Amir paced the floor, muttering, "We've lost 3 contracts. Investors don't want to touch us. The media's calling Jerome a black nationalist who's trying to dismantle academia." Keisha spun in her chair. That's what happens when white journalists discover a black man using words like revolution. Jerome rubbed his eyes. "They're not just attacking me. They're isolating us, making sure no one stands with Malcolm." Malcolm looked up. "They don't have to isolate me. I already feel like I'm alone." Jerome's voice softened. "You're not." But the conviction in his voice didn't land like it used to. Later that night, Naomi stopped by the lab. She'd been following the coverage, her expression unreadable. "They're tearing you apart," she said quietly, looking at Jerome. He nodded. "That's the point. They can't win the math, so they're rewriting the story." Naomi crossed her arms. "You sure you didn't make enemies in your own circle? MIT doesn't just find dirt. Someone hands it to them." Jerome hesitated. "We've had pressure before, but never like this." Malcolm watched him carefully. For the first time, Jerome looked smaller, not defeated, but burdened. Over the next few days, the team began to fracture. Meetings turned tense. Quiet conversations happened behind doors. Trust was eroding faster than funding. One night, Keisha pulled Malcolm aside. "You think Jerome's telling us everything?" Malcolm frowned. "What do you mean?" "He's been on the phone at weird hours. Says he's talking to legal advisors, but we don't have a lawyer on retainer." "Maybe he's trying to fix things," Malcolm said. "Or maybe he's trying to protect himself." He wanted to dismiss it, but doubt had already been planted. By Friday, Proof Systems was a shell of itself. 2 more backers pulled out, citing ethical concerns. The media wasn't calling it a startup anymore. They called it a movement turned mess. Malcolm tried to work, but every keystroke felt heavier. Every equation looked blurred. That evening, Jerome called an emergency meeting. "Listen," he said, standing in front of the whiteboard, the glow of the projector cutting sharp lines across his face. "They've won this round. I won't sugarcoat it. We're broke, we're under investigation, and they're painting us as radicals. But this isn't the end." Taryn muttered. "Feels like it." Jerome ignored her. "We're pivoting. I'm pulling from my personal reserves to keep us afloat for 60 days. After that, we find new investors, ones that don't scare easy." Keisha crossed her arms. "Who's going to invest now? The entire internet thinks we're cyber activists. Then we show them we're not." Jerome said, "We publish everything. Transparency, open data. Every revision of the algorithm. Let the truth speak for itself." Malcolm hesitated. "That's what got us here last time." Jerome turned to him. "No, kid. What got us here was thinking truth speaks for itself. It doesn't. You have to scream it until they can't ignore it." But the scream was starting to sound hollow. That night, as Malcolm left the lab, Naomi caught up with him outside. The streetlights flickered against the wet pavement. "Something's off," she said. He looked at her. "You mean the leaks?" She shook her head. "No, the money. I checked the federal filings for Proof Systems. The accounts don't add up." "What do you mean?" Jerome said he was running on empty. "But your payroll's still processing. Funding's still coming from somewhere." Malcolm frowned. "From his reserves." "No," Naomi said. "Not his. Someone else's." She handed him a printed sheet. A donation record from a shell company labeled Quantum Research Initiative. "It's clean on paper," she continued, "but the routing numbers trace back to Cambridge. MIT's central funding account." Malcolm blinked. "You're saying MIT's been funding us?" "Not officially," Naomi said. "Through a proxy. It's hidden, buried under educational grants. Someone inside is feeding this." He took the paper from her, staring at the numbers as if they might rearrange themselves into sense. "Why would they do that?" he asked. Naomi's eyes were cold. "Control. Keep your project alive just long enough to claim ownership later. They're not trying to destroy Proof Systems, Malcolm. They're trying to absorb it." Malcolm felt the ground tilt beneath him. "So the leaks, the smear campaign, it's all distraction." Naomi nodded, "while they quietly buy what they couldn't beat." Malcolm clenched the paper in his hand. Jerome doesn't know, does he? Naomi hesitated. I think he does. The words hit harder than anything that day. He stepped back. No. Jerome wouldn't. He would, Naomi said softly. If he thought it kept you safe. Malcolm turned toward the warehouse lights flickering in the distance. Or if he thought it kept him safe. Inside, the sound of Jerome's voice carried faintly through the cracked windows. Another phone call. Another deal. For the first time, Malcolm didn't hear conviction in it. He heard fear. Naomi's voice broke the silence. You built this place to prove they couldn't control you. But what if they already do? The paper crumpled in his fist. He looked back toward the lab. The place that had felt like freedom. And for the first time, it looked like a cage. Naomi finds a mysterious donor funneling money from within MIT itself. When truth is buried, time becomes the enemy. The rain came back to Boston the next morning. Not as a storm, but as a slow, endless drizzle that made everything feel gray and heavy. Malcolm sat at his desk in the warehouse, staring at the donor sheet Naomi had given him the night before. The numbers glared back like coordinates to a betrayal. Quantum Research Initiative. The name was meaningless on paper, but the money behind it wasn't. MIT had disguised its reach behind layers of shell companies, funneling quiet control into the very project built to defy it. He read it again, his jaw tightening. They've been inside the whole time, he muttered. Naomi leaned against the wall, arms crossed. That's how they operate. They infiltrate, invest, then claim they were part of your success all along. Jerome walked in mid-sentence, coffee in hand, eyes weary. We have bigger problems right now. The lawsuit's eating us alive. I'm on the phone every hour trying to stop investors from fleeing. Malcolm didn't look up. Stop pretending you don't know. Jerome froze. Know what? MIT's been funding us. Through Quantum Research Initiative. The warehouse fell silent. Jerome's hand tightened around the coffee cup. Where'd you hear that? Naomi stepped forward. From me. I traced the routing numbers myself. Jerome sighed, setting the cup down. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Malcolm asked. Jerome hesitated, just long enough to confirm the truth. When our funding collapsed, someone approached me, said they wanted to support underrepresented innovators. Said they were anonymous but committed to our mission. I didn't ask questions because we were drowning. Malcolm's voice cracked with quiet anger. You didn't ask questions because you already knew who it was. Malcolm. No. He cut him off, standing. You told me to stop asking for permission, but you sold it back to the same people who took everything from me. Jerome's tone hardened. I kept this place alive. Without that money, proof systems would have died months ago. Then maybe it should have, Malcolm said. At least it would have died free. Naomi stepped between them. Stop. Both of you. We don't have time for this. They're not waiting. They're moving. I got a call this morning from a journalist at the Globe. They're investigating the donor trail, and they've already found inconsistencies in MIT's funding records. Jerome frowned. Inconsistencies? Naomi nodded. Racial discrepancies. Turns out 92% of MIT's internal innovation grants in the last decade went to white-led projects. The quantum shell might have been their way to hide the optics, while keeping control over any diversity success story. Malcolm's stomach turned. So even their charity is a cage. Naomi nodded. And now that the journalists are digging, MIT's gonna panic. They'll come for you, Malcolm, for your data, your prototypes, everything. Jerome looked at them both. Then we beat them to it. He turned to his desk, pulling out a hard drive. We push everything public. Every dataset, every test, every line of code. We don't wait for lawyers or courts. We make it open access. Naomi hesitated. If we do that, they'll say you leaked proprietary research. They already said that, Jerome replied. The difference is, this time the world sees it first. Malcolm stared at the drive in Jerome's hand. He could see his reflection in the metal casing, the face of a man who had spent his life proving he belonged, now fighting just to exist on his own terms. He took the drive. Let's publish it. For the next 20 hours, the warehouse turned into a war room. Jerome coordinated the media list. Independent journalists, STEM equity advocates, tech ethics blogs. Naomi handled encryption and cloud backups. Keisha and Amir cross-checked every timestamp, ensuring no one could accuse them of manipulation. Malcolm uploaded files one by one, the algorithm's logic unfolding line after line. Each click felt like an act of rebellion. Outside, the city pulsed. unaware that a battle for truth was unfolding in a forgotten warehouse. By midnight, the air was thick with exhaustion and caffeine. The server whirred, lights blinking steadily, as if marking time. Naomi looked up from her screen. Uploads at 63%. Once it's live, they can't stop it. Even if they pull it down, mirrors will keep it alive. Jerome checked his watch. We need to finish before 9 a.m. That's when the courts reconvene. If MIT gets an injunction before then, everything freezes. Malcolm nodded. Then we move faster. He sat back at his desk typing code into the terminal. One more layer of protection, one last digital lock. His hands shook, but not from fear, from urgency. Naomi glanced at him. You haven't slept in 2 days. He didn't look up. Neither has Justice. At 2:17 a.m., the generator flickered. The lights dimmed. Amir cursed under his breath.
Power fluctuation. It's not the storm. Someone's hitting our network.
Jerome rushed over. Can you trace it? Trying, Amir said, fingers flying across the keyboard. Pings coming from multiple IPs. It's not random, they're coordinated. Malcolm froze. MIT's trying to breach us. Naomi's voice was steady. Then we outlast them. Jerome grabbed his phone. We can't risk losing everything. We'll back up to external drives. Keisha already had 3 plugged in, data transferring rapidly. If they shut us down, we'll still have physical copies. Malcolm's mind raced. Split them, one to Naomi, one to me, one to you. They can't seize what they can't find. The network warning beeped again. Intrusion detected. Amir muttered, they're inside. They're deleting logs.
Then pull the plug!
Jerome shouted. The room went dark as Amir yanked the main power. The hum died, leaving only rain against the windows. They stood in silence, hearts pounding. Naomi clicked her flashlight on. Drives? Keisha held one up. 2 finished before the cut. Malcolm exhaled. Then we've got enough. Outside, sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Jerome looked out the window. We're out of time. They're coming for the servers. Then we split up, Naomi said. 3 drives. 3 exits. Meet in DC tomorrow. Same cafe we talked about. Malcolm nodded. We'll finish the upload from there. Naomi slipped one drive into her bag. If they catch me, you finish it. He hesitated. If they catch me, you finish it. She smiled faintly. Deal. They left through separate doors into the rain. Malcolm walked fast, hood up, cutting through alleys and side streets. The hard drive in his pocket felt heavier than metal. It felt like memory. Every step he took was toward freedom, but also toward risk. He reached the train station by dawn. His ticket to DC was booked under a false name Naomi had arranged. The crowds were sparse, commuters and early flights. He kept his head down, moving quietly through the terminal. Just ahead, an announcement blared. All passengers, please prepare for random security screenings. Malcolm's pulse quickened. He clutched his bag tighter, moving toward the boarding gate. He tried to steady his breathing, reminding himself he had nothing to hide. But in America, that wasn't always enough. At the checkpoint, an officer waved him forward. Sir, step aside, please. Malcolm froze. Is something wrong? Random selection, the officer said, motioning to 2 others. They led him toward a side corridor. One officer opened his bag. The hard drive sat on top, wrapped in plastic.
What's this?
The officer asked. Data, Malcolm said carefully. My research. The man examined the label. Proof systems backup 3. He exchanged a look with the other guard. We've been instructed to detain you for questioning. Malcolm's heart pounded. On what grounds? The guard's tone was flat. Suspicious cyber activity. You'll need to come with us. He looked around. No Naomi. No Jerome. Just strangers watching him. Another black man in handcuffs for reasons too complicated to explain. As they led him toward a side exit, the intercom echoed faintly across the terminal. A final boarding call for the DC train. Malcolm whispered under his breath. They found me. Just hours before their publication deadline, Malcolm is detained at the airport for suspicious activity. Sometimes justice needs a witness, and the world watching. The world had already seen the footage of Malcolm being led away in handcuffs. Someone at the airport had recorded the moment. His calm face, the black duffel slung across his shoulder, the officer gripping his arm. By the time Naomi reached DC, the video was everywhere. MIT whistleblower detained. Again, Black inventor arrested while carrying his own work. History repeats at Logan Airport. By morning, outrage was global. Scientists from Lagos to London, Accra to Atlanta, posted under one hashtag, "Let Malcolm speak." The story spread like wildfire across academic circles. Professors published open letters. STEM organizations demanded his release. Students at MIT itself staged walkouts, chanting his name under the glass dome that once excluded him. When Malcolm was finally released, after 16 hours of questioning, the world was waiting. Jerome was outside the federal building when he walked out, eyes sunken, suit wrinkled, but fire intact. Cameras flashed like lightning. "Mr. Rivers," a reporter shouted, "do you think MIT orchestrated your detention?" Malcolm didn't stop walking. "I don't think."
I know.
Naomi met them at the car, pressing a small envelope into his hand. "The files made it through," she whispered. "We've still got the data." Malcolm looked at her, gratitude flickering behind exhaustion. Then they didn't win. But the war wasn't over. It was moving back to court. 2 days later, the same courtroom that once smelled of varnish and arrogance now smelled like tension and exposure. Seats were full. Reporters lined the back rows. A live feed broadcast the proceedings worldwide. Judge Marjorie Lynn took her seat with measured calm. "We will resume Massachusetts Institute of Technology versus Proof Systems LLC. The defense has requested to submit new evidence. Mr. Carter, you may proceed." Jerome stood, his tie slightly loosened, his voice low but sharp. "Your Honor, we intend to prove that not only was Mr. Rivers' algorithm independently created, but that MIT's own internal systems confirm this." Harrington, MIT's lead attorney, leaned forward, smirking. "We look forward to this miracle." Jerome turned toward Naomi. "Dr. Blake, you're up." Naomi walked the witness stand with quiet poise. She looked different now, calmer, harder, like someone who had lost everything except the truth. Jerome asked, "Dr. Blake, what is this document?" She held up a printed report. "This is an internal MIT email chain from the Office of Research Integrity, dated 6 months before Mr. Rivers was accused of trespassing." Jerome nodded. "And what does it show?" Naomi met the judge's eyes. "It shows that MIT's mathematics department had already been reviewing fragments of Mr. Rivers' earlier work, obtained from janitorial access logs and security footage. They analyzed his chalkboard derivations before accusing him of stealing." A ripple spread through the courtroom. Harrington stood abruptly. "Objection. This is speculative and illegally obtained." Judge Lynn cut him off. "Overruled. Continue, Dr. Blake." Naomi's voice didn't waver. MIT knew what he'd done, and they wanted it. But acknowledging it meant admitting their own negligence and their prejudice, so they erased his name and replaced it with their own. Jerome stepped closer. "Can you verify this document's authenticity?" "Yes. It's from the same email archive MIT's lawyers submitted during discovery. They overlooked the thread when redacting." Harrington's face drained of color. Judge Lynn leaned forward. "Is this true, Mr. Harrington?" He hesitated. "Your Honor, internal correspondence is complex. Interpretations. Answer the question," the judge snapped. "It appears the document was included in error," Harrington said tightly. Naomi turned back to the gallery, her voice clear. They built their defense on a lie. The courtroom erupted in whispers and gasps. Outside the courthouse, MIT cover-up trended again. Inside, Jerome pressed on. "Dr. Blake, one final question. Why did you risk everything to come forward?" Naomi looked at Malcolm. "Because I was part of the silence once. And silence is the prettiest cage racism ever built." Judge Lynn's gavel struck. "Order." Jerome turned to Malcolm. "Your turn." Malcolm took the stand slowly, steadying his breath. Jerome began gently. "Mr. Rivers, can you explain the new data you've brought?" Malcolm nodded, connecting his laptop to the court's monitor. "This is my algorithm. And these," he said, pulling up a folder, "are time-stamped commits from my private repository. Every line of code is date-verified by an independent blockchain archive." He clicked through the timestamps, each one glowing in sequence. Dates stretching back to before his arrest, before proof systems, before MIT's labs even acknowledged his existence. Jerome asked, "And what do these timestamps show?" "They show I wrote this code alone, in my father's apartment, months before MIT claimed ownership." The room was silent. Malcolm continued, his tone growing steadier. "Each file includes Encrypted mathematical proofs, tied to a digital signature, mine. MIT's internal copies match those exact signatures, meaning the only way they have them is by accessing my private data. Harrington shot to his feet. That's absurd. Malcolm turned toward him. No, what's absurd is pretending I'm a thief when your servers are the ones full of stolen work. The gallery stirred again. Jerome nodded. Can you explain how this encryption works for the record? Malcolm smiled faintly. It's self-verifying. The equations create their own checksum, a mathematical fingerprint. If anyone edits or copies it, the checksum breaks. It's proof that math remembers who wrote it. Judge Lin leaned back, intrigued. You're telling me the algorithm identifies its own creator? Yes, Your Honor, it's built into the code. I didn't plan it that way, but I think I built myself into it. Jerome smiled. No further questions. When Harrington stood for cross-examination, his confidence was gone. Mr. Rivers, he began carefully, you've been painted as a victim, but isn't it true that your algorithm was developed using MIT's resources? Malcolm shook his head. I used their chalk, their floor, their silence, nothing else. Laughter rippled through the gallery before the judge's gavel brought it down. Harrington tried again. You understand that MIT's contract is void, Malcolm interrupted, because it was signed under conditions that never applied to me. I wasn't a researcher. I was a janitor's son cleaning your mistakes. Even the judge didn't hide her reaction this time. Jerome stepped forward. Your Honor, with your permission, one final demonstration. Judge Lin nodded. Jerome gestured to a technician by the projector. We uploaded MIT's own replicated version of the algorithm from Discovery. I want to show you something. On the screen, 2 lines of code appeared side by side. Malcolm's on the left, MIT's on the right. They looked identical. Then Jerome zoomed in. At the bottom of Malcolm's code, in faint gray text, was a comment line. The kind programmers leave for clarity. It read, SAR, irreality, resists, Malcolm stared at it, speechless. Jerome turned to the judge. That line exists in MIT's copy too. Because they didn't write it, they copied it. Even his initials stayed. A stunned silence filled the room. Judge Lin's voice was measured. Is this verified? The court's digital forensics expert stood. Confirmed, Your Honor. Metadata shows the tag originated from Mr. Rivers' repository. Jerome nodded. Then, Your Honor, MIT not only lied, it plagiarized. Publicly. Systemically. From the very man it called an intruder. Harrington looked pale, flipping through his papers, searching for a rebuttal that didn't exist. Judge Lin turned to him. Mr. Harrington, does MIT deny this evidence? He hesitated. No, Your Honor, but Jerome cut him off. No more buts. You can't hide behind policy when the math tells the truth. The judge exhaled slowly. I will review all submissions before rendering a verdict. But before she could adjourn, a figure rose quietly from the plaintiff's side. It was Dr. Patel, MIT's assistant dean. Her hands shook slightly as she stepped forward. Your Honor, she said, voice trembling, I can't stay silent anymore. Harrington turned. Sit down, doctor. But she didn't. I was part of the cover-up, she said. Gasps erupted across the room. The administration told us to suppress anything connecting Mr. Rivers to the algorithm. We were told to discredit him before the media could see the truth. Judge Lim leaned forward. And who ordered that? Dr. Patel swallowed hard. Dean Alderson. And the Board of Trustees. The courtroom exploded into noise. Reporters shouting, camera shutters firing like machine guns. Judge Lin slammed her gavel. Order. I said order. Patel kept speaking, tears in her eyes. I stayed silent, because I was afraid. But when I saw how far they went, the leaks, the arrest, I couldn't anymore. They didn't just steal his work, they stole his future. Malcolm sat frozen. For the first time, someone inside the system had said it aloud. Jerome's voice was quiet. Thank you, doctor. Judge Lin took a deep breath. We will recess for 1 hour before final deliberation. As everyone rose, Malcolm turned to Naomi. His hands trembled slightly. Do you think this changes anything? He asked. Naomi looked at him, at the exhaustion and fire battling in his eyes. It changes everything, she said softly. But it's not over until she says it. Malcolm looked toward Judge Lin's empty seat. The weight of the world felt balanced on that bench. Decades of bias, silence, brilliance, and proof all colliding into one fragile pause. He whispered to himself, please let truth mean something this time. The judge pauses before delivering the verdict. When truth finally wins, it doesn't heal. It echoes. The courtroom was packed tighter than ever when Judge Marjorie Lynn returned to the bench. The tension was a living thing, breathing, pulsing, heavy enough to bend the air. Journalists were silent for once. Cameras already rolling, red lights blinking like eyes waiting to witness history. Malcolm sat at the defense table beside Jerome and Naomi, his palms flat against the cool surface. Every muscle in his body felt locked, every thought tethered to one fragile hope, that this time, the truth would matter more than power. Judge Lynn cleared her throat. After reviewing all submitted evidence, testimony, and documentation, this court finds the following. The room stopped breathing. Massachusetts Institute of Technology, she continued, her voice steady, is found guilty of intellectual misappropriation, suppression of evidence, and malicious defamation against Mr. Malcolm Rivers and his entity Proof Systems. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap that refused to fade. Gasps. Then silence. Then a murmur that swelled into disbelief. Malcolm blinked, barely registering it. The sound blurred. The world folded in around those words. Guilt. Judge Lynn continued. The defendant, Mr. Rivers, is recognized as the sole author and intellectual originator of the algorithm known publicly as the Rivers Predictive Field Model. Furthermore, the institution shall issue a formal and public apology, reinstate all improperly revoked credentials, and provide financial compensation for damages. Jerome exhaled sharply, eyes closing for a moment, as if he'd been holding that breath for months. Naomi's hand gripped Malcolm's arm. You did it, she whispered. But Malcolm didn't answer. He just stared forward, still trying to process what winning even meant. Judge Lynn tapped her gavel once. This verdict will stand as precedent in future cases regarding intellectual ownership and racial bias within academic institutions. She paused, then added quietly, let it also stand as a reminder that intelligence does not belong to pedigree. It belongs to persistence. The courtroom erupted. Reporters surged forward, microphones rising like weapons, flashes turning Malcolm's face into a mosaic of light. Mr. Rivers, how does it feel to win against MIT? Do you think this changes the future for minority innovators?
Will you return to academia now?
Malcolm stood slowly, adjusting his tie. For the first time in his life, the noise didn't feel like rejection. It felt like reclamation. He met the nearest camera and said simply, justice isn't revenge, it's remembrance. Outside the courthouse, hundreds had gathered. Students, activists, scientists, and ordinary people holding signs. Truth has no gatekeepers. MIT, meet the janitor's son. Black genius matters. As Malcolm stepped through the doors, the crowd erupted in cheers. Naomi shielded her eyes from the flashbulbs. Jerome stood tall beside him, and for one suspended moment, Malcolm felt weightless. But as he looked across the sea of faces, he noticed one man standing apart. His father, Thomas Rivers, in his old maintenance jacket. The old man's eyes were wet, but proud. He didn't cheer or wave. He just nodded once, the same way he used to when Malcolm came home with a good grade. When Malcolm reached him, Thomas spoke quietly. You made them say your name, son. Malcolm swallowed hard. They made you lose yours. Thomas shook his head. They can't take what I gave you. They just proved it. Jerome joined them, smiling. You both just changed the system. Thomas gave a low chuckle. Systems don't change easy, son. They just learn to hide better. That night, the world turned Malcolm Rivers into a headline and a symbol. Every major outlet ran the story. News anchors debated whether the verdict signaled a new dawn for racial equity in science. Op-eds praised his brilliance. Others critiqued his defiance. But the narrative had shifted. Finally, he wasn't the janitor's kid who broke the rules. He was the mind who broke the mold. MIT's official apology came 48 hours later. A press release posted quietly online. We acknowledge the unjust treatment and misattribution of Mr. Malcolm Rivers' work. The institution deeply regrets the harm caused by systemic oversight and bias. We are committed to ongoing reform and equity within our academic community. It was polished, clinical, and utterly bloodless. Naomi read it aloud in the warehouse, the same room where everything had begun. Systemic oversight, she repeated bitterly. That's their way of saying racism, without saying racism. Jerome laughed dryly. They'd rather rebuild the building than rebuild their conscience. Malcolm said nothing. He was staring at the whiteboard, where his equations still lived, faded, but intact. He traced one line with his finger, the chalk dust staining his skin again, an echo of the night it all started. Do you feel any different? Naomi asked softly. He shook his head. Winning doesn't undo the years you spent invisible. Jerome put a hand on his shoulder. It doesn't have to. Visibility's not the end, kid. It's the weapon. Later, as night folded around the warehouse, Malcolm sat with his father by the window. The city lights shimmered across the glass. People are calling you a hero, Thomas said, sipping his tea. I'm just tired, Malcolm replied. Thomas smiled faintly. That's what every hero says when the noise dies down. Malcolm turned toward him. You still don't have your job back. I don't need it, Thomas said simply. They paid me to clean their floors. But you? You cleaned their conscience. Malcolm let out a small laugh. Half disbelief, half exhaustion. Outside, thunder rolled low and distant, like applause too far away to reach them. By morning, reporters camped outside the warehouse. Donations poured in for proof systems. Black scholars from around the world sent messages of support, some offering to collaborate, others just thanking him for existing. But victory carried its own kind of silence. Malcolm noticed the way people spoke about him, not to him. The way journalists romanticized his pain, the way his father's story got reduced to a metaphor for resilience. The world loved redemption stories, he realized, especially when they could package black suffering as inspiration. Jerome saw it too. They're gonna build monuments out of your scars if you let them. I don't want monuments, Malcolm said quietly. I want movement. Naomi approached holding an envelope. Speaking of movement, she said, handing it to him. This came through certified mail. Malcolm frowned. From who? No return address, she said, but it's stamped with a federal seal. He tore it open carefully. Inside was a single sheet of thick paper with a gold emblem bossed at the top. National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Dear Mr. Rivers, we have followed your recent case and reviewed your research regarding adaptive field equations. Your model has implications for deep space engineering, far beyond what current simulations achieve. We would like to invite you to a private consultation at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, to discuss potential collaboration on future projects. Sincerely, Dr. Elena Price, Director, Advanced Materials Division. Malcolm stared at it in silence.
Naomi leaned closer. NASA?
Jerome grinned. They went from calling you a trespasser to calling you a national asset. Thomas chuckled softly. Guess they finally realized the janitor's kid can reach the stars. But Malcolm's expression didn't change. The paper trembled slightly in his hand. Every invitation has a cost, he murmured. Naomi frowned. You think it's a trap? I think it's an opportunity, Jerome said. But opportunity and control look the same at first. Malcolm folded the letter carefully, slipping it into his jacket. He stared out the window again, where dawn was breaking pale and uncertain. Maybe it's time, he said softly. Naomi tilted her head. Time for what? He looked back at her, the exhaustion still there, but something sharper beneath it now. To see how far truth can really go. The warehouse was silent for a long moment, the kind of silence that holds both hope and history. Jerome finally spoke. Then I guess you're not done rewriting the sky yet. Malcolm smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes, because deep down he knew the system never ended. It just changed uniforms. And the higher you climbed, the colder it got. A letter arrives, a private invitation from NASA. He began as a janitor's son. Now his mind powers the future. The California air felt different. The heat carried a stillness that Massachusetts never did. Less history, less judgment, more horizon. Malcolm stepped out of the car at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, his badge glinting faintly in the sun. The security gates hissed open with a mechanical sound that felt almost ceremonial. He paused before walking in. The words "property of NASA" were engraved in silver on the glass doors, but he could still see his reflection, the boy who once scrubbed floors, now staring at the stars. Inside, the corridors were white, sterile, humming with the low rhythm of technology. Screens projected simulations of spacecraft, solar radiation models, and quantum feedback systems. The air smelled like ozone and ambition. A woman in a lab coat greeted him. Dr. Rivers, I'm Elena Price. Welcome to JPL. He shook her hand. Malcolm is fine. Not here, she said with a smile. Here, you're a lead systems analyst. You've earned the title. It felt strange hearing it. Dr. Rivers. He hadn't finished a degree. His credentials weren't printed, They were proven. As they walked down the hallway, Dr. Price spoke briskly. We've been analyzing your model for weeks. The way your algorithm adapts to environmental shifts. Honestly, it's years ahead of anything in our simulation software. Malcolm nodded, keeping his tone modest. I designed it to predict change, not resist it. That's where systems fail. They assume control. She smiled. You'll fit right in here. But Malcolm knew better. No matter where you went, control was always the currency. They entered a circular room filled with engineers and glowing displays. On the main monitor, a digital spacecraft rotated in slow motion, surrounded by streams of data. Dr. Price gestured toward it. We're calling it the EOS project, a prototype for self-repairing spacecraft architecture. Your predictive model is our core. Malcolm blinked. My model? She nodded. It's officially designated as the Rivers Framework. It's been fully integrated into our field simulations. He stared at the screen, unable to speak for a moment. His father's name was now etched into the technology guiding humankind beyond the atmosphere. And yet something in his chest tightened instead of relaxing. That night, he sat in the temporary apartment NASA had arranged for him, a small unit overlooking the Arroyo Seco Canyon. The city lights below glowed faintly against the dark sky. Naomi's voice crackled through his laptop. So, how does it feel? He hesitated. Like standing inside a dream that doesn't quite belong to me. You mean they're using your name? She said, but not your story. Malcolm nodded slowly. Exactly. Naomi leaned closer to the camera. Then tell it. You've got the world's microphone now. He smiled faintly. I don't want a microphone. I just want a mirror. One that shows every kid like me that it's possible to exist in places that were never built for us. Then build those places, she said softly. That's how you win. Over the next few months, Malcolm buried himself in work. His days stretched from sunrise to midnight. The US project evolved rapidly. Spacecraft materials that could sense microfractures, recalculate structural stress, and heal in real time. It wasn't science fiction anymore. It was real. But the attention came back too. Interviews, profiles, panels. Every time he declined, they wrote about him anyway. The genius who beat MIT, the janitor's son who taught NASA to think. He didn't correct them. He just kept building. Yet at night, when the lab emptied and silence reclaimed the hallways, he'd find himself staring at his reflection in the observation window, surrounded by stars, simulated on screens but still out of reach. One evening, Dr. Price found him there. You ever stop working, Malcolm? He smirked. Not really my habit. She studied him. You know, NASA loves your story. It's inspiring. He raised an eyebrow. You mean useful? She didn't deny it. We need symbols. People who make the impossible feel possible. Malcolm looked back at the simulated sky. Then they'll never see me. Just the idea of me. Dr. Price sighed. Maybe. But ideas move faster than people. He turned toward her. And that's the problem. She smiled faintly. You're not wrong. Then she handed him a file. When you're done with EOS, I want you to lead something new. Something entirely yours. Malcolm blinked. Mine? Your framework changed how we think about prediction. We want to see how it behaves in human systems. Medicine, climate, economics. We'll fund it, no questions asked. He hesitated. And who will own it? Dr. Price met his gaze. That depends on you. For the first time in his career, the choice was his. He didn't answer right away. Instead, the next morning, he boarded a flight back to Boston. No one at NASA knew why. He told them he needed a personal reset. The city felt colder, quieter. He walked through MIT's campus at dawn. The same pathways he once cleaned, now lined with plaques quoting men who never knew his name. The buildings gleamed with history, but he saw the cracks underneath. He found the janitorial corridor easily. The smell of disinfectant hit him like memory. The same hum of lights, the same echo of mops sliding across tile. When he reached the small maintenance closet his father once worked in, he stopped. The door was half open, just as it had been that night years ago, when he'd wandered into the lab. Inside, nothing had changed. Buckets, brooms, a cracked mirror, and a bulletin board covered in old notices. Dust lay on everything like a blanket. He knelt, running his hand over the floor. The linoleum was scratched from years of movement. His father's footprints had probably worn half of them. He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his jacket, a note he'd written the night before. On it were 5 words. I was here, And so are you. He pinned it to the wall above the mirror, using an old tack left behind. Then he stepped back. For a long time he just stood there. The hum of fluorescent light above, the smell of ammonia, the ghost of everything that began here. His reflection in the mirror stared back, split slightly by a crack running through the glass. One face divided into two worlds, who he had been, and who he had become. He whispered, "We made it, Dad." And for a moment, it felt like the air shifted, as if Thomas Rivers' quiet pride still lingered somewhere in the walls. Outside, as he walked down the hall, a janitor passed him, a young black man in his early 20s, earbuds in, mop in hand. He nodded politely. "Morning," the janitor said. Malcolm smiled. "Morning." He wanted to tell him everything. The years, the pain, the impossible math of survival. But he didn't. Some stories were meant to be discovered, not told. He just kept walking. Hours later, the janitor returned to the closet, setting down his cleaning cart. He noticed the note pinned to the wall, crisp and new against all the faded paper. He read it aloud softly. "I was here, and so are you." He smiled, tracing the words with his fingertips. "Who wrote that?" he murmured. There was no answer, just the quiet hum of the building, a sound that for the first time didn't feel empty. The camera would have lingered there, on the janitor's hand resting against the words, the same light reflecting across his skin that once touched Malcolm's. The same cycle, the same system, now cracked open just enough for someone else to see inside. A new janitor's kid looks up at that note, tracing it with his hand. As the camera fades to black, some truths don't need shouting. They just need witnesses. Because every time someone is silenced, it takes one voice to make the world listen again. If this story made you feel something, type yes if you believe in justice, and subscribe if your heart still aches for change.